Coming up, it's turmoil for Tuchel as Bayern hit Dortmund for 5. More misery for Mourinho as Chelsea lose a game. It's the history books for Zlatan at PSG. La Viola go top as the Serie A race hots up. And Jurgen Klopp, is he the man to reignite the Kop? All that and more on today's Football Hipsters Podcast. All right! Welcome to the Football Hipsters Podcast. We are new, so greetings one and all. My name is Kris and I will be your host for the show tonight and forever. We are going to be talking football and lots of it, both European and worldwide. We will be here with you hopefully in the long run. This is indeed our pilot episode, so we're just looking to get an idea of who likes us and who doesn't. If you don't like us, don't tell us, because it'll only hurt our feelings. Right, let's introduce you to the merry men that I have joining me on this debut episode, and the friendly faces you'll hear a lot more from as we go along. So introducing first, he's our man who will look after the hipster side of Serie, and his name is John. Say hello, John.
Hi, Kris.
And introducing to you our La Liga expert / hipster, and his name is Tom. Good evening, Tom.
Good evening.
And moving along to the English Premier League by way of an Aussie. Good evening, Jake.
Hello.
And across to Germany and the Bundesliga and all things German, and this is Drew. Good evening, Drew.
Hey guys, how are you?
All good, thank you. And on to the next one. Last but by no means least, it is our man in the know across all things other than the main leagues we've talked about. He is the best of the rest, and his name is Danny. Good evening, Danny.
Ahoy, hoy, Captain.
Hoi, hoi, hoi to you, sir, as well. I will be not only your host, but I will also be your Liga expert. All things French, come to me. I say expert, I'm not really an expert, but you can pretend. I'm sure I will. Right, so let's get into the meat and potatoes of our podcast. We will be coming to you on a weekly basis, if you like us, of course, and we'll be bringing you all the best from all across the main 5 leagues in Europe. As we mentioned before, that will be the Serie A, the Premier League, the Bundesliga, La Liga and Liga, and the best of the rest, which Danny will cover. Our aim is to bring you top class, or in some cases not top class, punditry, and give you the latest lowdowns on all the things going across the leagues, and hopefully have a nice bit of chat with some of our friends from the Twitter sphere as well. So without further ado, we are going to be covering our own hipster teams. We all have a team, and we all cover, which we'll all give you updates on a weekly basis, and this segment is called the Mighty 90. So let's get right to it then. The Mighty 90 involves 90 seconds where our pundits will have the opportunity to introduce themselves and why they follow their hipster team of choice. They'll also give you some juicy stats. When the 90 seconds clock runs out, I will interrupt them rudely and cut them off. So without further ado, we're going to go across to our first hipster, and that is John. So John, are you ready, sir?
I'm ready.
Okay, without further ado then, John, your 90 seconds starts now.
Okay, my hipster team is Borussia Mönchengladbach from the Bundesliga. I've been supporting them for, I can't remember, as long as I've been watching football, I suppose, from a very young age. I heard about them first from my father, who talked about the famous team from the 1970s. That made it to the European Cup final, sadly losing to Liverpool. They did win 2 UEFA Cups in that decade. They also had one of my favourite German players play for them, Lever Matthäus, started his career there, and a certain Marco Reus made his name there as well. Sadly, this season hasn't been going so great. We're currently sitting 13th in the league. Quite a few losses already at the start of the season, which led to Lucien Favre, the now ex-manager, walking away from the club. He wasn't fired because Gladbach aren't that sort of team, they are actually sensible, and a rare thing in football these days. They actually give people time. But Andrew Schubert has come in as the interim, and since he's come in, players seem to have responded well. Started to get a few more wins, performing better in Europe, which they haven't been in for a very long time, so it's very exciting for the fans to be back in that competition. But at the moment they are looking to get a permanent manager in, and Augsburg's Markus Weinziel, which I hope I've said correctly, is the top name being floated about. I'm looking forward to bringing you more news on Gladbach as the season goes on.
And that's your time. Very good, John. Thank you very much for that. So moving it along, so John will be keeping you in touch with all things Gladbach. Let's see what Tom has to offer. So Tom, coming to you, and your Mighty 90 begins now.
Hi, I'm Tom, and I'd like to put across that I think I'm the most hipsterish team supporting person in this podcast, supporting Red Bull Salzburg of the Austrian League. Yep, you heard that right, this is the Austrian League. To be fair, they haven't done too well this season compared to previous seasons. They're now second in the league, and that's compared to their last season where they actually won the title is a bit of a surprise. They unfortunately lost their first 2 games this season, losing to their bitter title rivals Rapid Wien and then Mattersburg, which is actually a bit of a surprise. However, this hadn't been helped by the fact that Salzburg lost their main striker, Jonathan Soriano, who was obviously one of the biggest strikers around Europe in terms of goal scoring and strike rate, even though you probably haven't even heard of him. This season, though, after losing Marcel Sabitzer last season, who was banging in the goals for them, they've got a young Japanese striker called Minamino, who scored 9 goals in 14 matches. But that's this season anyway. I'll give you a little bit of background about the club. They was actually bought in 2005 by the Red Bull company, and they were previously called SV Austria Salzburg. This caused actually a section of fans to leave the club and form a new team. And they were called Austria Salzburg, like the previous club was before. They're playing the Red Bull Arena, as the naming rights have proclaimed, and hopefully the team can carry on this season and reach the heights that they have done in previous seasons, with the likes of finishing as champions and cup winners.
With 2 seconds to spare. Well done, Tom. Thank you very much for your information. And again, keeping us in touch with all things Austrian. We'll be back with you throughout the future podcasts. So thank you for that. Moving it along then, let's take a trip down under. Jakey, your Mighty 90 begins now.
Hello. Well, my hipster team of choice is Ajax FC of Holland, or the Netherlands, if you prefer. They are my grandfather's team, who he is Dutch, and I've basically grown up hearing all about them. Currently, they are top of the table in the Bundesliga on goal difference after 8 games, 19 points. The goal difference is just a little bit superior to Feyenoord, who are in second at the moment. At the moment, in this point in the season, Anwar El Ghazawi, the 20-year-old, is the leading scorer for the club with 7 goals. And also, Davy Klaassen is leading assist maker for Ajax this season, currently with 3 assists. They are not in the Champions League this year, which is a shame because they are quite a well-known historical team in the Champions League, as they, in the early 70s, won the old European Cup 3 times in a row. So hopefully it'll be good going for them and good going for all Ajax supporters of Holland this season. Also, I have a couple of players to keep an eye on this season coming out of Ajax, as the academy over there is always fantastic. The one I will mention briefly is Rashedli Bazwa. I can't pronounce his surname properly, but quite a quality midfielder, and will be one to coming up through the world of football in years to come.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Jake. And of course, when you said Bundesliga, you didn't put Ajax in the German league, really, did you? You just transferred them briefly.
Yes.
No, of course. We all know what you meant. You meant Eredivisie. It's all good. Right. So let's switch across now to Danny. Sorry, no, we're going to go to Drew. And Drew, your Mighty 90 begins now.
So, bit of an Eredivisie rivalry, I guess, sort of in the group. My have 2 choices of Feyenoord, also from the Eredivisie. Based in Rotterdam, also known as the Club Andamas, which is the Club of the Muse, which is the river that runs through. Some former recognizable players everyone might know is current Southampton manager Ronald Koeman, Dutch greats Johan Cruyff, Ruud Hillet, Willem van Hanegem, and kind of a culty player, if you will, Giovanni van Bronckhorst, also is the current manager, and two Swedish greats, Henrik Larsson and Ove Kindval. Currently, they're sitting second in the table, behind the aforementioned Ajax. Current form, they've only dropped 2 points out of their last possible 12. Only loss in the season was to PSV, which was 3-1 at Eindhoven. That's really about it. Former kind of cult hero Dirk Kuyt recently returned to the club. Currently leads the club in goals with 4. Their most creative player, club right now, is Karstorp. He's only 21. Keep an eye out for him moving forward. The Dutch kind of black quality at the back. So yeah, that's much for now.
Fantastic. Well, you actually have a whole 8 seconds to spare, so I'm going to talk over it. But that was very good, Drew. Thank you very much, and your time stops now. So thank you very much for that. Okay, just one person left. Danny, the floor is yours, my friend. Your Mighty 90 begins now.
Well, as you lot have linked all the decent European teams around the world, I was left with a few choices. Corinthians, and I thought I'd never pronounce all their names right. So I've gone for my local team, Peterborough United, who I first should have seen in 1991 when they beat Liverpool 1-0 in the League Cup. But we got our tickets, got to the gate, they said it's full, and they told us to bugger off. So we never actually got to see the game. We went and had a Burger King instead. So they... From my front door to theirs is about 15 minutes, and the same back again if you're in a hurry because of the traffic. But yeah, I always think it's a good thing to support your local team because there's you got more of a link to them. So there's many of the teams all around the world that I could say I supported that I'd be interested in, but no, I decided to stick with Peterborough. And some of you might remember some of the world-class players. We had Simon Davies played for Spurs. You've had Mark Tyler of Fulham, Super Ken Charlie. He played for Peterborough on about 7 different occasions. Super Leon McKenzie, he was another great striker. I think he might have played for Watford at some time, but my favourite of all time was Craig McHale-Smith. He's currently playing for Luton. What a fantastic player. We've had a hell of a season at the moment. We got some bloke in who'd never been a manager in his entire life, but used to be in the Special Forces or something like that in the Army. He come in, no idea. They sacked him. They've now got 2 ex-players, player managers in. They're doing brilliantly. It's back to the old days where Peterborough would go out and win 5-3. They've scored about 17 goals in the last 4 games, and it's just a really great time to be a Peterborough fan. And I think there's a few people I know on Twitter that are also Peterborough fans. So yeah, people go support your local team.
Fantastic. Professional as ever, Danny. Thank you very much for that. That leaves just me, unfortunately. So I'm going to have to start the clock on myself. So my Mighty 90 will start now. So my hipster team of choice is in the French league, you'll be surprised to know, and it is Lorient, who are down in the Brittany area of France. They currently reside 9th in Liga at the start of this season. They actually won the Coupe de France, their only trophy to date in 2002. So not the most successful team, but they're fun. I came to support Lorient after a family trip in the early 2000s, visited the area, got to see the stadium, which is the Stade Yves Allemand, or better known as Le Moustoir. It actually has a synthetic pitch, one of the very few pitches across Europe that actually plays on a synthetic surface in the top 5 leagues. It's a little bit hipster for you there. They've currently won 4 of the last 5 games, and their manager, who's relatively inexperienced, is building something, we hope anyway. His name is Sylvain Ripoll. Notable players in the past, I'm a big fan of Laurent Koscielny, who obviously went on to play for Arsenal, and Kevin Gamera, who's currently playing his trade at Sevilla in La Liga. And also their former manager was the father of Johan Gourcuff, who you'll all be familiar with for the French national side. Christian Gourcuff was the previous manager. They currently have 3 top name signings of Benjamin Makanju, Abdul Waris, and Benjamin Janu, who's playing up front at the moment. And their star man is Rafa Guerreiro, who's a full Portuguese international. So that's me, and that is a Lorient for you. So there we go. So that's the Mighty 90 segment. I should just explain for all of our new listeners, which I'm sure will be all of you because you won't have heard of us before. We will be doing the Mighty 90 segment on a weekly basis each week. However, it won't be quite as rushed. As you'll probably appreciate, we had to cram in a lot of information there about our chosen hipster clubs. In the future, we will just be bringing you a very quick update on how the teams did in their most recent fixture. So probably only likely to be 1 or 2 at the max to get in each week. So we'll give you updates on how our teams go. And if you are listening, tweet us your favourite teams. The most hipster choice of the lot will get some love from our Twitter account. So if you follow somebody in the Kazakhstan Premier League, do let us know. So let's move on then. So we've got 5 very clued up gentlemen here. We're all gonna have our area of speciality, and I'd like to get into the meat and potatoes of our show today. And what I'd like to do is just go around the relevant leagues, just have a little bit of a discussion about how teams are getting on, what the sort of situation is in the leagues, and how things are panning out for various teams across Europe. So, without further ado, we're going to go into the Bundesliga first of all. So, with his Bundesliga update, here comes Drew.
Groß geht kurz. Özil. Mertesacker! Nachschuss von Müller! Aus dem Stegreif das 1:0 für Deutschland.
So, I don't really know where I should start. There's a lot to cover, but I guess for starters, since the international break, we can just update everybody on what the top 6 is currently. Obviously, it's Bayern Munich at the top. Dortmund, Schalke, Hertha Berlin, FC Köln, and Ingolstadt run up the top 6. Bottom 3 is Augsburg, who have clearly regressed after their strong finish last year, where they finished in the Europa League spot. Hannover 96 and Stuttgart continue to somehow be awful, despite them being traditionally stronger. In form side at the moment is obviously Bayern with 3 wins of their last 3. Hertha and Leverkusen and Mönchengladbach, much to John's happiness, are all also in form as well. Same thing with Schalke. Worst in form at the moment, Werder Bremen, actually. They've lost 4 in a row, so they're the worst, lacking in form in the league at the moment. Augsburg, Frankfurt, Wolfsburg, and Dortmund as well are all struggling currently. Goal scoring charts, Robert Lewandowski unsurprisingly leads with 12. Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang, not Aubameyang like Danny likes to call, has 10. Thomas Müller has 8. Then Modeste from Cologne and Mali from Mainz both have 6. An interesting fact about that is Lewandowski and Müller account for 20 of the 28 goals that Bayern have scored. So, I don't know, too much reliance, but we can get into that later. A couple talking points I wanted to bring to you guys, actually. If anyone wants to sort of chime in, I know sometimes, especially maybe John or Jake might want to chime in. People keep saying that Bayern's a runaway train, and it sort of makes the Bundesliga come across as a one-trick pony kind of league. If anyone wants to chime in on that after I run through them, that's okay. Wolfsburg seem to be struggling after Kevin De Bruyne went to Man City. A real lack of creativity now that he's no longer there. In fact, Daniel Caligiuri, I think, is their most creative source. That's not really saying all that much. Ingolstadt and Cologne find themselves in the top 6. So we saw how well Augsburg finished last year under Weinzel. So it's been interesting to find out to see if someone can sort of take that role of, spoiler and have a smaller club finish high up the table. Another one is Lewandowski cementing himself as the best striker in world football, not just on current form, but overall. Let's see. One more thing. Transfers. Everyone likes to talk about those. Douglas Costa seems to be standing out as sort of the best of the bunch. He came from Shakhtar Donetsk from the Ukrainian league, which isn't really tops by any means, but he sort of fit the mold really well at Bayern to start. He's been very creative. Sort of a lot of their strong showings have sort of come on the back of him. Johannes Geis, who I know Kris really kind of rates when we talked about that last year. He went from Mainz to Schalke this summer, and he's sort of, I don't know, Germans always seem to have midfielders just coming through the pipeline, so he's another one to look out for. Same thing with Julian Weigl. And a surprise is Lucas Stanos, who went from FC 20 in Eredivisie to Frankfurt, and he's actually in the top 5 or 6 goal scorers in the charts this year. And he only went for 2.5 million euros, so that's interesting to pay attention to. Some players to watch. Obviously, Douglas Costa, Kevin Volland, who a lot of hype was surrounding him at Hoffenheim, but he sort of now seems to be finding some form and getting some confidence. He's gotten a little older. He's got 5 goals so far in the league in 8 appearances. Weigl, as we mentioned. For John, this is for you. Raphael seems to be leading the Gladbach resurgence as of late. He actually leads the Bundesliga in assists currently. And also, guys, as well, I pinpointed him to watch out for. Schalke are performing much better right now than they were last season. And having that strong midfield core seems to be doing some good, and he's a huge part of that. I also pegged some young talent to look out for. I try to get one from each team. Some clubs don't have any players that have made appearances so far that are actually under 21 years old, so I did as much as I could, one from each team. Kingsley Coman from Bayern, we're going to talk about him later. As I said, Weigl from Dortmund, Leroy Sané from Schalke, Mitchell Weiser at Hertha Berlin, Leonardo Bittencourt at Köln, Max Christensen at Ingolstadt, Jonathan Tah at Leverkusen. That's one that Jake always likes to talk about. Maximilian Arnold at Wolfsburg, Michael Gregorisch is an Austrian for you, Tom, at Hamburg. Mark Stender at Frankfurt, Andreas Christensen at Gladbach, Ulysses Garcia at Bremen, Niklas Sula at Hoffenheim, Konstantinos Staffelidis at Augsburg. He's now their new left back after Rahman Baba went to Chelsea, and he's currently sitting on the bench. Keenan Karaman at Hanover, and Timo Werner at Stuttgart. I know there's a bunch of time left, Chris. Maybe 8 minutes left, 9 minutes left, or so.
That's
how much time is left?
I would say you pretty much covered everything I could possibly ever imagine covering, Drew, to be fair. So I want to go on.
I did want to, if there was time, I did want to see if any of the guys wanted to sort of pick up any of those talking points that I just highlighted before, just for just quick banter, have some more opinions if possible. But if not, that's fine.
No, absolutely. In fact, I am going to do that very thing. I mentioned, as you would have heard in the intro, that there was quite a big match for the past weekend, which is commonly named as Der Klassiker, although a lot of Germans are not particularly a fan of that tag. It's more of a commercial thing. But it saw Bayern Munich put 5 past Borussia Dortmund. Where do you think that leaves the league currently? Where do you think that leaves Dortmund, and where does it leave the league in general in Germany?
I just think it's difficult. I know we've all spoken about it before, and we're starting to see it more and more in the Premier League, but on maybe a wider scale. But Bayern have a stranglehold on the league in all respects, not just results in history and prestige. That's all fantastic, but they have so much money that other German clubs don't have and cannot have access to. Bayern is quickly becoming a very big global brand. Most German clubs aren't. Dortmund is the second closest you can get to, and even they don't have a wide following outside of just Europe. So Bayern are getting revenue streams coming in that allow them to spend huge sums of money on players to constantly upgrade themselves. And it's not just, the best available. They brought in Arturo Vidal this summer as well. They brought in Douglas Costa, players, of that quality. But for them, most Germans want to play for Bayern. It doesn't matter if you're Bavarian or not. That's sort of the pinnacle. It's the same as a lot of English players wanting to play for United. Same sort of premise. So it's difficult for a lot of other upstart clubs to sort of build something long term when Bayern can just come in and give them money they can't say no to because they don't have the revenue coming in. So it does, as much as I love the league, currently it is sort of coming under threat to become just one of those, Bayern every year kind of things, the way it used to be with Ajax for so long, or the way it used to be one of Juventus, Milan, or Inter, one of those kind of things. It's hard to figure out who can really peg Bayern. I know Dortmund did it previously, and a couple of years ago under Klopp, and that was fantastic, but it's not sustainable with them because Bayern could just come in like they did with Dortmund and buy their best players, and then their sort of sustained challenge at the top will just sort of dissipate. So for me, it's a bit of a question mark. I don't know what your thoughts on that are, though.
Well, I'll give my thoughts, but I do just want to get the thoughts of the panel as well before I chime in. John, obviously you're a sort of resident hipster of Bundesliga as well with Mönchengladbach. How did you see the Bayern Dortmund game, and how do you sort of see the Bundesliga, or Bundesliga 1, as I should say, shaping up this season?
But the actual game itself, Dortmund had a few chances, earlier on in the game, and they weren't playing that badly. I mean, Bayern weren't overrunning them in any sense. It wasn't really till the second half, and then Bayern just sort of turned it on. I think the question of them dominating the league is something that we've seen in other leagues previously, where you had it in the 90s with sort of Man United and Arsenal dominating the Premier League, and you had Madrid, Barca dominate the Spanish league. Bayern are obviously the biggest club in Germany, but I don't think really people realise how much quality their team has. That comes down to smart recruitment as much as the financial power. You have to get the right players, because the people that they have on the bench and that they can call in when they've got injuries is just unbelievable, the quality. And even the young players, the faith they have in young players and being able to play them in games and develop them at the speed they can is really impressive. The management that they pick, whether it has been Guardiola or Jupp Heynckes in the past, they always seem to get the right people. It's just a very well-run club. So it's difficult for anyone, say like a Wolfsburg or Dortmund, to really catch them. I think Dortmund showed that teams can do it for a short period, but they're going to struggle to sustain that kind of pressure over a long time. If other clubs can get bigger commercial deals, then maybe they can have more money to invest more in their teams. But, when you've got the likes of Frank Ribery and Arjen Robben not even playing in the Bayern side, and others coming in and performing to the level that they are, and people like Drew said, Douglas Costa already making such an impression, it's going to be really difficult to catch them. But I don't think it's as much a blowaway league. I think Dortmund will push them further this year, which actually probably will be a benefit for Bayern Munich, because what they tend to do is have the league sewn up by winter, and then they don't have that motivation and push to continue on in the Champions League.
Absolutely. And just on the Champions, go on, Drew.
Oh, I was going to say, one quick thing I wanted to say was it might only be a blowaway league in regards to who can challenge for the title, but what's not a blowaway league about is it seems that every place from 2 to 6 or 7 every year can rotate pretty strongly. So I feel like other leagues don't necessarily have that, but Germany does, because there's actually a lot of very good clubs in Germany. They might not be good enough to challenge Bayern, but they're very good enough to challenge for a top 4 or 5 place, and that will rotate year on year. So I think that's a very big redeeming quality that other leagues may not necessarily have. How we always talk about how the top 4 in England traditionally has always been set in stone. Spain's top 3 is always huge, set in stone. Scotland, Celtic and Rangers forever, and then maybe Aberdeen or Hearts, whoever felt like being good that year. But Germany always seems that they can have a lot of surprises, which I think that's what makes it still as entertaining as the other leagues, despite Bayern being so heavily rooted at the top.
Yeah, absolutely well said. Before we leave Germany behind, I just want to ask you, Drew, and I'll ask this to all of you guys for all of your leagues. Drew, give us one team that you think might surprise a few people before the end of the season.
Oh man, I was not prepared for this. Might surprise. I mean, you would expect me to say, Dortmund or Schalke like that, but I actually think, despite the slow start, I think Gladbach are going to charge back up the table. I think Gladbach will finish in the top 4, despite how slow they started. I know I'm not trying to get on John's good side again, but I think once losing a manager like Lucien Favre it's a blow initially, but sometimes change is good, and it seemed like that it was the right time for it. Recent results may reflect that a little bit. I think over time they'll be surprised just by how strong they'll finish based off of how slow they started.
Absolutely. And I should also give a shout to former Paderborn manager who's doing good things at Schalke, which is Brighton writer who's doing good things at Schalke. I think they might come good as well. So for those of you listening, if you've got questions on anything Bundesliga, do send Drew a tweet. We'll have all the links of this of our Twitter handles in the podcast. So send Drew a tweet, and we will endeavour to get your questions answered. I know we've got one later on coming up as well. So thank you very much for that, Drew. Let's move then to Spain. And with his Spanish roundup, we're going to go straight to Tom.
Toca también Rubén Bezo, le llega Di María centra el remate. ¡Golazo! ¡Golazo! De Cristiano Ronaldo!
Hello. Yeah, Spain. Oh, it's that league, isn't it? Everyone goes, oh, well, Real Madrid or Barcelona, who's it going to be this year? However, after 7 games, you'd really kind of expect the league to have taken a bit more shape. However, this season it's gone a bit skew-whiff, shall we say, with Villarreal currently sitting at the top of La Liga. And it's a bit weird because they actually lost their last fixture and they've remained at the top of La Liga, if that puts anything into perspective of what's going on right now. Barcelona, yeah, they started off strongly as you would expect. However, what's been in the news in Sky and BBC is everything that Messi's actually had an injury and it's caused him to be out for a considerable amount of time. And he's been putting on Instagram trying to reassure all the Barcelona fans that he's doing everything he can to try and get back as quickly as possible. But unfortunately, the cracks are starting to show. They lost to Sevilla in the last game, which in itself is a very disappointing result when I move on pretty soon to how Sevilla have done this season. But yeah, they lost to them. Leverkusen very nearly caused a scare at the new camp. Luis Suarez had to turn around and save them in the end. But with their first game without Messi, it was very evident that the cracks were starting to show. In terms of Real Madrid, they've been reasonably strong. They haven't lost a game all season. They've won 4 and they've drawn 3 matches. And after the first match where they drew 0-0, I really thought that it might be a bit of a misfire in Madrid in terms of how the season pan out, but they soon came good with wins, and they were certainly putting 5 and 6 past respective teams. And Betis and Ronaldo got 5 goals against Espanyol, which was an incredible feat. So you can see that the best player in the world who loves to make noises when he wins trophies is still banging in the goals. In terms of teams that are doing well this season, Villarreal, as I mentioned, are doing very well at the top. They surprisingly beat Atletico Madrid 1-0. A little hipster fact is that the man who scored in Leo Baptistao is actually on loan from Atletico Madrid. So a bit of backstabbing going on in La Liga these days. They also have a little player called Roberto Soldado, who obviously left Spurs after a pretty dire stint at the club, and he's actually done reasonably well. He's played 6 games and scored 2 goals. And it's after when you saw him join the club and he couldn't even kick a ball into the supporting fans who turned up to finally see him put in the back of the net. I'm sure the Villarreal fans are going to be very happy about that. Another team that are actually doing quite well and sitting in third are the small club of Celta Vigo, who managed to put 4 goals past Barcelona, of all teams. They've got a very exciting player called Nolito, who ironically used to play for Barcelona before he went on loan to Benfica and Granada, and he left Benfica in the end to move to Celta Vigo for a minimal 2.4 million euros, and he's scored 5 goals this season. In terms of how I think they'll do, I think they will eventually drop off. You'll see the league take some more shape in the matches to come. Barcelona will get Messi back, and they will adapt to not having him in the side. Obviously, it's a bit weird when you don't have Messi, you're playing Suarez and Neymar, and they've actually resided in Munir on the right-hand side in recent matches. Teams that are struggling are surprising, actually, when you look at them, because Sevilla have been awful this season. That was actually summed up in their recent Champions League performance against Juventus, which lost 2-0, where they really, really couldn't do anything against a Juventus side which themselves have been struggling at the beginning of the season. They've lost games against Las Palmas. They've lost games against Atletico Madrid and drawn games against Malaga where they really should have won. So I didn't mean Atletico Madrid, Atletico Bilbao at home, which is a really quite surprising result, seeing as Bilbao are sitting down in 13th at the moment. They have been on the up, as I said. They beat Barcelona 2-1. They beat Vallecano 3-2 as well. So they're scoring goals, but they're just unfortunately conceding them at pretty much the same rate. And when a player like Steven Nzonzi is your top scorer, that pretty much sums up everything that's going on the side. I'll finish off with talking about Valencia, which they're sitting down in ninth at the moment. They've not had a particularly great start to the season. They drew their first 2 games and then went on to draw another against Betis with an interspersed win against Gijon, which is pretty expected. They lost to Espanyol. They beat Granada, lost to Bilbao, and in Europe so far they've beaten Lyon away from home, which is quite a feat actually, but they lost at home against Zenit, which was a bit unfortunate there, which means that the Liga table is really setting up for a finish of who's going to get 4th, because obviously you'd expect Real Madrid, Barcelona, and Atletico Madrid will come good and will take the top 3 spots, but with Sevilla and Valencia struggling, you're looking at the likes of Villarreal and Celta Vigo to take that 4th spot for the Champions League places, and whoever gets the Europa League spots, with the likes of the lowly Deportivo and Eibar sitting in 6th and 7th, it could be a real surprise who gets into the Europe next season.
Good stuff. Yeah, very thorough, Tom. Thank you very much. I know we had a couple of questions that the guys want to put to you. So we'll go to Drew, who has a question for you on all things Spanish. So over to you, Drew.
Yeah, Tom. So, it's arguable that Nolito's been the player of the year up to this point. Do you think that he is bringing out the best of Iago Aspas and Fabian Orellana, or have they actually meshed to the point where the other 2 are contributing just as much, not just statistically speaking, but during the run of play? Or is it just sort of Nolito is basically that sort of keystone to the attack? What do you think?
In my opinion, I'd say that Nolito's been a big keystone and a big player for them. He scored 5 this season. He's in the top 3 of goal scorers in the league. And even though I would say Iago Aspas is doing very well, which is surprising seeing as what you saw him do at Liverpool, which wasn't too great. Right. He put 2 goals past Barcelona in the 4-1 win, as well as Nolito adding his own stamp on that. But I really think Celta Vigo can do something this season. I think they could be up there competing for that 4th spot, if I'm honest. They've got a solid team, and with, as I've said, Nolito and Aspas, they can go far. The only thing I have with Nolito is now he's coming good. He's turning 29 this season, and they are going to have to look to someone to come in and possibly do something more, whether that's in January or the summer that's coming up. But I could see Nolito playing for a top team, be that in the Premier League or higher up in the Spanish league. But he's definitely a player that's one to watch this season. As you mentioned, he's definitely the best player of this season so far.
Good stuff. Cool. And thank you, Drew. And a question from Jake as well.
Yeah, Tom, I was just wondering, I've seen a few... there's been a couple of paper rounds with Nolito. Maybe there'd be some Premier League teams interested in his services. Like I saw some links with Manchester United and Arsenal and so on. Do you think even at his age he would adapt to the Premier League if there was a move? And how likely do you think a move would be in January?
In January, I'd say it'd be very unlikely that Celta Vigo would be willing to sell him, because he really is the player that they need. They don't need to sell him particularly either. In terms of whether he fit into the Premiership, I believe he would. If you look at Arsenal, I really think he could come in and play on that left-hand side. In terms of Man United, I don't think he would get into their team with Memphis and Mata and Young. I don't think he would get into that team. But certainly, going back to Arsenal, when they've got players and youngsters in the form of Oxlade-Chamberlain, Gnabry, at the age of 29, he can certainly come in and be someone to learn off and certainly do a job there. So I think he could play in the Premiership. It's just he is 29 now, so he's not really going to be gaining any more in potential and gaining experience. He's more going to be someone to learn off of and really play at the peak of his career.
Good stuff. Okay, thank you for the question, Jake, and thank you for your updates there, Tom. Same question as I asked Drew before. Give us your surprise package or a team to look out for in La Liga.
Surprise package for me have to be Villarreal. They're sitting at the top at the moment. They're doing very well. They've got surprise results against the likes of Atletico, yeah, I think they can go far. They had a solid defence last season. Even when they lost arguably their best central defender in Gabriel to Arsenal, they continued in the same light. They had a bit of a dire end to the season, but they've actually moved on to this season and done very well. So yeah, if I was going to tip anyone, definitely be Villarreal.
Good stuff. Super. Thank you very much. And as with Drew's updates, Tom will be keeping us abreast of all things La Liga in the weeks to come. So let's take a trip somewhere else across this this foreign continent. Let's take a trip to where some of us are from, and that is England. And we are going to go across to Jake. And here comes Jake with his English update.
Manchester City are still alive here. Balotelli, Aguero! I swear you'll never see anything like this ever again.
All right. So I, as you know, Jake, doing the Premier League bit. Hope I do it proud, as it's the league I watch the most of. So yeah. As we go into the international break, we know that Manchester City are top of the table with Arsenal second. Just a couple of talking points that I'd like to go about is the form guide going into the international break was that Arsenal and Tottenham are the two most informed teams by points scored over the last 5 games, which is something good for all the Londoners out there. There's also been a few surprise teams coming up the table, and obviously Crystal Palace and Leicester have had really bright starts to the season, and Claudio Ranieri's probably done himself a bit of justice there, with a lot of people laughing at his coming into the club, but I think he's done quite well so far. Obviously, Jamie Vardy's leading the Premier League with goals scored at the moment, and you sometimes forget that he's 28 and he's not a prospect, formerly being a non-league guy from 3 years ago. But it seems a lot of the teams that would be considered relegation fodder have had a pretty good start to the year in terms of strikers and all that. Obviously, Callum Wilson being out for an unknown amount of time, he was looking quite well and was linked with a few moves before the transfer window shut. Agallo from Watford has scored the most goals of any player in England, I think, in 2015. So that's pretty interesting. Also, just a couple of little stats at this point in time in the Premier League. David Silva is currently leading the league with assists, and as of my best information at the start of the international break, Santi Cazorla from Arsenal, since he's moved to the Premier League, has more assists than any other player. I actually found that. I had absolutely no idea of that. I would have thought that someone like Silva would have been right there alongside him with that. Manchester City are going to have a little spot of bother with the reoccurrence of a hamstring injury for Sergio Aguero after his best Robert Lewandowski impression against Newcastle, who I've also just recently found out that Newcastle have lost Tim Krul for the remainder of the season, so that could be a potential blow for them. Also, just one player I've had that's caught my eye in recent weeks was a signing by Claudio Ranieri at Leicester. It was I don't know his first name now, but Kante, the midfielder. He's quite a little pocket rocket there in midfielder, defensive midfielder. He as much as I can give him credit for winning the ball, he does lose it a lot. Like for every time he wins it, he seems to go on a little bit of an excited run and end up taking on 2 or 3 players and loses the ball. But there's definitely some talent there. For me this season, I'm not sure. I've had debates with others about who I think will be relegated, and I think at least 2 of the teams that come up are going to go down. I'm not sold on Bournemouth as much as I like to watch them, and I think Eddie Howe's done a great job there. I don't think they're going to last the course, with or without Callum Wilson, by the way. And it seems that the either Newcastle or Sunderland are really going to be in a spot of bother. And as I have a few family members who are big Newcastle fans who still live in the area, I'd hope that didn't happen for their sake, as I didn't want to have to hear them for 25 minutes on the phone talk about Alan Shearer. But yeah, that's more or less what I've got covered at the moment.
Good stuff, Jake. We've got plenty of questions. Obviously, quite a few of us are from England, so there's a few bits and bobs here. John, I want to come to you with a kind of a question I've got for you and Jake to share.
Sure.
In our intro to the show, it was announced this week that Jurgen Klopp is joining Liverpool to succeed Brendan Rodgers. Just wanted to get your thoughts from a sort of Bundesliga / Premier League viewpoint as to how you think that will go. And once you're finished, if you hand over to Jake to get his thoughts on that as well.
Yeah, sure. I think for the league as a whole, it's exciting. Anyone who watched Dortmund whilst Jurgen Klopp was there, or even when he was at Mainz before, Drew will be able to tell you more. But he's a very exciting, energising manager. Really connects with the fans, and generally, tries to get his teams to play exciting, attacking football. Something that Liverpool did actually have for a little while under Brendan Rodgers. To be fair to him, I know he gets ridiculed a bit, but they did almost win the league, and it was certainly that he was the guy who got the most out of Luis Suarez. So I don't think he can be quite slated as badly as he has been by some people. But Jurgen, he'll be a hit with the media and the fans, certainly. I don't think he's got a very easy time of it when he comes in, because I think within his first 5 games, I know they've got to play Chelsea and Man City, which is going to be really difficult to adjust. But he'll certainly give the dressing room a lift. The players will know about him. There's Emre Can will probably know more about him than a lot of the dressing room. He's got good young players there. You look at players like Coutinho. They brought in Firmino, obviously. Firmino, not Firmino, in the summer. Christian Benteke and Daniel Sturridge, both proven goal scorers in the Premier League. So he's got the basis to work with things there. I think that the key for him is being given time, and also how much say he has over the transfer policy. There's been a lot of talk that Brendan Rodgers didn't have as much input as he would have liked. And then they had a more continental style sort of transfer committee at Liverpool. And something similar happened whilst Kenny Dalglish was there. So there was talks that Klopp, that was part of his agreement to sign a contract, that he had more say in those things. So if he's given time there, I think he can certainly turn things round. It's the amount of time he's given, because he can get players to buy into a project. But if they think immediately that they're going to, get that manager and then go on a run to win the Premier League, then obviously that's not something that's going to happen. So if they're given time, he'll certainly do things. But I know Jake certainly got some views on Klopp.
Yeah, over to you, Jake. What do you think?
Well, obviously the appointment of Klopp's, it's a great buzz for Liverpool, and let's put a mean face on it. They've been a bit of a laughing stock in terms of their transfer wheelings and dealings. I've heard so many people say that none of the other big teams in England would have even took a second look at Danny Ings, and even paid the outlays they did for guys like Lallana and so on. And if Jurgen's there, he's gonna. The more say he has, I think it's going to be better for them. Now, in saying that, while I think Chelsea are in quite a hole at the moment, I still would put my money on them making the top 4 over Liverpool, because it's going to take time for Liverpool to adjust, and guys like Benteke and Sturridge are going to be battling for the leading striker spot, and you don't know who is going to be more suited to Klopp's style. And last negative thing I'll say, Liverpool fans, is I think there's maybe a hint. I don't know what relationship he can build up in short amount of time with Coutinho, but I think if they don't make the Champions League this year, there could be a serious bid coming from some Spanish teams. Like we've seen a few links here and there, and I'm not one to throw my hat on transfer stories from any media, but you could imagine it happening again. And while Klopp's appointment is a big thing, you have to. He's a smart man, and he's even said himself, please don't expect me to. I think his quote today was, I can't walk on water like Jesus. I think he knows what kind of a project he's getting into. I think he knows that the expectation is currently greater than the project itself, and that was probably something a little bit too strong for Brendan Rodgers to deal with. But he's going to do well there. It's going to take him time, but it's all about the fan base giving him that time to build the team he wants. Now, like I said, if they're expecting to be in the Champions League this season, they can't put that on Jurgen Klopp because, 8 games in, they're 10th on the ladder, I believe. It's going to take time, but, there's definitely next season, and he can, bring in 3 or 4 more players that he likes, and the team will be behind his style. But the last thing I'll say is let's hope for his sake that he doesn't have the same situation where he did at Dortmund, as every season one of his best players will leave, because if he gets the best out of Coutinho between now and the end of the season, then loses him, it's just going to be the same thing that happened to Brendan Rodgers. And the Liverpool board have really got to back him and try to keep their best players at the club. Otherwise, if he were to go in a few years' time, you've got to seriously start looking beyond the manager and start looking at the board of the club, who have taken a bit of criticism themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, very, very thorough. I appreciate that, Jake. I'll come back to you very briefly for your team to watch in a second. But before I do, we did, again in the intro we covered sort of Chelsea's downturn in form and obviously their manager having a bit of a tough time at the moment. Danny, I want to come to you on this one. What do you think is going wrong at Chelsea, and how do you see this playing out with Mourinho?
Well, first of all, I think the main problem is the fact that their pre-season was disastrous. They played too many games, they come back too late, they weren't fully fit. All these excuses have been done. Then they were beaten by Arsenal quite wonderfully in the Charity Shield, and then they started their season off with a dodgy draw at home to Swansea, which you would have thought they'd have won, especially with the way they ended last season. Then they got, and probably the biggest dent to them league-wise was them being smashed 3-0 by Man City, and Man City could have doubled the number of goals they scored there. Then they had an easy win over West Brom. Most people could beat West Brom, and then they lost at home to Palace. And I know there was a lot of jokes going around about Cech and Arsenal, and that Cech had lost more games in his first game for Arsenal than he had lost in his entire career at home for Chelsea. But then as soon as Cech has gone, Chelsea have fallen apart. They're letting in more goals in the first 10 games of the season. I think it's 10 games than they had in the entire of last season, or some stat that went a little bit like that. Then you had the stuff with the Chelsea doctor Eva Caniero. Is that how you say her name?
Yeah, yes, I believe it is. Yeah,
because there was an issue with there because if the doctor comes off, then the player has to come. If the doctor comes on, then the player has to come off. And I think Chelsea were already down to 9 men at the time. So Jose said, "Look, I don't want her to go on." He thought it was obvious, don't go on, because if you go on, that means we're going to be down to 8 men. So she ran on doing her job as a doctor. He lost the plot, screamed at her, made himself look like an idiot, made the club look like sexist people. She's gone, and he's then said to her, "You're not coming again." She's now left the club. There's legal action going on there. Then Chelsea's form has continued to drop, and then they lost the next game against Chelsea, and then to draw 2-2 with Newcastle was lucky, because the Newcastle were 2-0 up, and then he's dropped John Terry, and then John Terry made a point of going out after the game and warming down even though he hadn't done anything, and the Chelsea fans were saying, "We want our captain back." And then you've got Hazard going on his longest run ever without a goal, and that hasn't helped. And you've got Fabregas and in midfield doing absolutely nothing. Matic, he has said, can't play. He brought Matic on at half-time. He played another 20 minutes and then took him off again, or 26 minutes, something like that. And he said he couldn't pass, he couldn't tackle, he couldn't run, he couldn't do anything. So it seems this season the team is falling apart around Mourinho's ankles, and he is blaming everybody from the doctor to the players to the owners for not giving him the money. And it's just very strange to see. I've never known in all my years of watching football a Division 1 or a Premier League champion to collapse in the next season the way these have been collapsing, because we're only 8 games into the season. I said 10 earlier. It's not. It's 10. It's 8. They're on 8 points, so that works out at 1 point per game. And at the end of the season, they're probably possibly end up with 38 points for the entire season. So that might just keep them up if they're lucky. But it's only for the fact that Newcastle and Sunderland and Villa are clubs in crisis and doing absolutely nothing. Otherwise, Chelsea would be in the relegation zone, and they're not that far away from it now. So it's a very strange situation, and it does make you wonder if. Jose said he's not a manager that quits. But I wonder how much longer it's going to go on, because I think the last time that he left Chelsea is when they drew or lost at home to a very lowly team in the Champions League, and they've already had a bit of a dodgy start in the Champions League. They won the first game, and then the second game they lost the second game to Porto. That was it. They went to Porto and lost, I think, 2-1. It's just very strange to see that someone of Mourinho's stature to be acting the way he is. I think there's maybe more stuff going on, and the amount of money he must be on a long contract, he isn't going to walk, so they're going to have to sack him.
Yeah, so certainly a lot to go on there. I think a lot to come out of that situation. We will stay tuned, and Jake will keep on top of it for us. Jake, just before we switch gears to another league, give us your team to watch in the Premier League this year, or who you think might do all right.
Well, I think the England hopeful manager Alan Pardew is going to try and do his best with Crystal Palace, and I think a top 10 finish for them. Maybe the Palace fans had hoped for a little higher, but I think anything in the top 10 would be brilliant for them. And Johan Cabaye's come back to the Premier League in pretty good form, and after an unsuccessful spell at PSG, so he's really helping the team. And I think if they're pushing the top 10 or even the top 7 still come January, look for them to maybe make another move or two. And who knows? I'd definitely say them and Leicester are the teams to keep an eye on. But the historical thing with the Premier League is, you get a team like last year, everyone thought for the longest time Southampton might make the top 4, but that is always proving more difficult than it looks. So, look, I think, like I said, anything in a top 10 finish for Crystal Palace would be pretty good. But the long-term concern might be, should England have a terrible Euro 2016 in France, they may very well look to Pardew, who seems to have been trying to clean up his act in the media of late, who doesn't seem to be strangling people and pushing other people around and so on. But if they keep hold of him, they've got themselves a manager who's maturing at his late 40s. That's great to hear, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, England job ahoy, some would say. Okay, super. Thank you very much for that, Jake. Obviously, you went into a bit more depth in the English League for obvious reasons. I'm sure we'll have a lot of UK listeners listening in. So let's move things on again then. And now we're going to take a trip kind of old school. We're going to fly across the seas and we're going to go to Serie A. Okay, John, so Serie A, let's take it away.
Yeah, I was struggling to try and find a start-off point for Serie A because, as usual in Italy, there's so much going on in such a short space of time. So if you all jump in a DeLorean and go back in time, we can jump to the transfer window, which is actually the first thing to talk about because it was like the Serie A of the 90s. Lots of clubs spending a lot of money, thanks to UEFA relaxing the FFP rules. Inter and AC Milan in particular spending well over 100 million euros between them on some, you wouldn't say the biggest name players, but certainly names that were mentioned about signing for, say, big Premier League clubs or big clubs in La Liga, like Jeffrey Kondogbia, Carlos Bacca moving from Spain, Luis Adriano as well. And the other team that really did a lot of things in the summer was Juventus as well. Lost 3 big players for their team, Carlos Tevez, Andrea Pirlo, and Arturo Vidal, who Drew mentioned earlier. Obviously, all left the club, and it's difficult to find players to replace that quality. There was a lot of new managers coming in as well. Fiorentina replaced Montella, who actually I thought had done a pretty good job previously, but they brought in Paulo Sousa, who Premier League fans won't remember. I should say Championship fans won't remember, was at Swansea, who was one of the leading men in starting Swansea on the style of play that they currently do. Milan brought in Mihajlovic, who Serie A fans of old will remember him playing for many different clubs throughout Italy. He was at Sampdoria last season, really impressed there. And Napoli replaced the fat Spanish waiter, as some people sadly call Rafa Benitez, with Maurizio Sarri, who did some really impressive things last season with Empoli. So there was a lot of movements. There's already been one manager fired, sadly newly promoted club Carpi. That's not Capri for anyone who's confused, because Carpi is in the north of Italy, and apologies to anyone who lives there, it's really not very nice compared to Capri, which is in the south. They fired their manager Castori after losing 5-1 to Roma, and brought in Sanino now. as for the league itself, at the moment, it doesn't look like Serie A. It's a bit like La Liga was saying earlier. Tom was talking about how you'd expect, Madrid and Barca to be dominating the league. Most people would expect that Juventus would be flying high, but they're right down there, below second half of the table at the moment. And it's actually Fiorentina who are at the top of the league, doing a really, really impressive start. They've only lost one game, which is away to Torino, which isn't the biggest surprise in the world. And Paulo Sousa has come in and really galvanised that team. They're very solid defensively. He still kept the three at the back with the wing-back play. Błaszczykowski from Dortmund has come in and is really thriving in the league. They've got great options up front in Babacar and Kalinic, who both scoring goals whenever called upon. Kalinic actually scoring a hat-trick, very good hat-trick against Inter Milan in a 4-1 absolute drubbing of Inter. Other teams doing well at the moment. It's currently Fiorentina at the top, and then followed by Inter, Lazio, and Roma. Napoli out in sixth. The Lazio team as well have been really impressive this season. Keita, Kishner, and Felipe Anderson, very young front forward three. Really exciting play. Anyone who thinks that Serie A is a boring league to watch really needs to watch Lazio, because they're very fast paced, very exciting. And they've actually been suffering with a few injuries to key players like Candreva. So these young guys have come in, really stepped up. There's also someone called Ravel Morrison, who a few Premier League fans might remember the name. He's actually even played a few games. Napoli as well, traditionally always a big club and doing great things, actually playing pretty well so far this season. Gonzalo Higuain probably in some of the form of his career at the moment, really playing well. And Insigne, who unfortunately just recently picked up an injury, up to that point before the international break, had really been showing some of the talent that he'd been promising to come through. The biggest story probably in Serie A season has been Juventus, who just looked a bit lost as a club at the start of the season. They lost their first two games, which hadn't happened for decades. They drew at home to Frosinone, who are a team that had just been promoted from Serie B, tiny small club. They lost away to Napoli. They brought in a lot of players. Pablo Dybala from Palermo. They brought in Sami Khedira. They brought in some other players from around Serie A and ones who they had part ownership in, who they've taken, bought their full contract out. Juan Cuadrado as well from Chelsea, but they haven't seemed to found the right lineup for the team. Who should be playing up front? Who should be playing as the number 10? There's a lot of pressure this year on Paul Pogba. It's basically been sort of widely known it's probably his last season at Juventus. He's been given the number 10 shirt as well. So being given Del Piero shirt is huge pressure. And Dybala, who's only just come in, has been given the number 21 Pirlo shirt. So there's real pressure on the young players at the club. They're seriously missing Claudio Marchisio as well, who's been out with an injury for a long time, who would have been the sort of senior midfielder there to settle the team down. Luckily for them, the last two games have actually improved a little bit, and Sami Khedira has come in and got a standing ovation in their last game, where they beat Bologna at home 3-1, with him scoring his first goal since 2013, which is quite a feat. I know he's been out injured for a long time, but he looks like he's getting back to his best. If they can keep him fit, that'd be a big bonus for them. And Juan Cuadrado as well, slowly starting to have an influence on the team. But as always, lots going on in Italy. So if anyone's got any questions they want to fire away.
Much to chew over there. I actually wanted to ask a question really to Danny, but for you, if that makes any sense. Okay. Danny, as one of the sort of the older people of the podcast, or the oldest, I should say, with age comes great experience.
Thank you, Sonny.
You will be familiar, of course, of the famous Italian football on Channel 4 over here in the UK in the 90s, and I just wanted you to sort of just talk briefly, and maybe any question you might have for John, about how good it is to see the likes of Fiorentina that we mentioned in the intro, that are top of the league, flying high, and potentially Mancini turning things around at Inter, and Roma making a go again, Lazio having a go again, Napoli having a go again. It's kind of good to see Italy having a bit of a reform, isn't it?
It is. My Italian team, much like John, is Inter Milan, and I've been an Inter Milan fan mainly because of back in the day when you could have 3 foreign players in the 80s in Italy. AC Milan went for Van Basten, Gullit and Rijkaard, and Inter Milan went for Klinsmann, Lothar Matthäus and Andreas Bremer. Sometimes I get those mixed up, but I think that's the gist of it. And that's when I first fell in love with German football and the German players, and it was just absolutely wonderful. And you used to think, each of those clubs could have 3 of the world's best players, and they went 3 Dutch, 3 German. Every now and then there's been the odd English player to go and play for Inter Milan, like Paul Ince has been over there, and there's been a few of the old I think there's one ex-old Man United player that went over there, and our very own, or one of my very owned ones, Liam Brady. He played over there for a little while, which is a little bit before my time, although I do vaguely remember him going more, remember him coming back playing for West Ham. But it just seemed to be something that was like, oh my God, you're going to go and play in Italy. Remember when Ian Rush, the legend, left Liverpool to go and play in Italy? You thought, he's going to go over there and he's going to be amazing, and he come back after one season. And then you had loads of other players like David Platt, went over there, and other lesser known players like Des Walker went over there, and there was a couple from Aston Villa. Paul Rideout and I can't remember who the other bloke was. Gordon Cowans. They went over to play for Bari, and it used to be like a little bit of something of a mystique when you went over there. And it's like, wow, you never get to see them play. And then when Channel 4 got the rights to show the Italian football, and AC Jimbo was there, waxing lyrical outside some French cafe with a huge big newspaper, translating it from Italian into English, you thought, oh wow, lovely sunny days no matter what the time of year. And then one of my favourite things back then, which has started to happen now, was the last game of the season. There'd be 9-5 or 7-3. It just used to go absolutely mental, the scores. And now I think there is a massive renaissance in Italian football, because people have seen that if you chuck enough money, AC Milan and Inter Milan have just had new owners. They paid vastly different amounts of money for each club. Juventus were dominant mainly because they were one of the first clubs in Italy to go and buy their own stadium, because if people don't know, most clubs over there share a stadium. On the San Siro is Inter Milan and AC Milan. I think Juventus used to share with Torino, Lazio and Roma. Do they share a stadium? And these stadiums are owned by the council. But for Juventus to go and do that, build their own stadium, they made it a much smaller stadium, much more compact, and all these things are all building up. But the thing that's got me most excited is everyone knows that Jose went to Inter Milan and he won stuff, but it was the fact that Mancini went there before him. Mancini was the one who built it all up. All Jose did was squeeze the very last ounce of greatness out of that club, and when he left it, they crumbled and fell apart, and that was the downside for me for Jose at Inter, although it was great with what he did. Yeah, I'm just looking forward to the days where it's not all going to be La Liga and Premier League. It's not that. The recent years, the Bundesliga has now become a big club a big league that people are talking about, and now I think Italy, Serie A is going to be back on the map as another big place that people are going to be talking about for football. And if you got BT Sport, and I think it's all on BT Sport, or was it on Sky Sports? I forget who has what now.
Yeah, BT. Yeah.
Yeah, but they just go and watch on there. And if people haven't got time to watch every single game, just go and watch the Jimbo one that he does, the hour and a half show. Is it an hour and a half every Sunday?
Yeah,
about 7:30.
Yeah,
that show. If you ain't got time to watch all the games, just go and watch that one show. Then you'll see football from all around the world, all over Europe, and it's really good. I mean, I'm starting to see stuff from the Eredivisie, because I remember that back in the mid '80s when Ronaldo was there, Romario was there. That was an up and coming league. It's just the whole football all over Europe seems to be regenerated, usually with Premier League money.
Yeah, so some good times hopefully are coming back. Now I know we've got 3 very quick questions from all of our other 3 panelists. So John, I'm going to hand it sort of back to you, as it were. Let's go for Jake. Your question to John first.
Quickly, just a tiny statement before the question. As some people may or may not know, the Italian leagues, the money that's floating around the Italian league isn't as expansive as it is in the Premier League and some of the other leagues, and that may be I think that's a lot to do with a little bit of Italian greed back in the day when the broadcast deals were going through. Some of the bigger clubs like AC Milan and Inter and Juventus and Roma and so on, they all decided to have their own television stations instead of going with the broadcasting rights, which has led to obviously a bit of downturn in the money, and we've seen the Italian league not be as fancy as it once were. My question is, I really hate seeing, I'm not a supporter, but to me it's just really I just miss seeing AC Milan up the top, like when they last won the Champions League with Pirlo and Kaká and so on. And what's it going to take for them to turn it around? Because it just seems like it's after, especially after that big banner in the stand last year, it just seems like it's, even with a new owner, things just don't seem to be going well. It's like they've got an anchor attached to the logo at the moment.
There's a need for investment, which they've done. Their midfield is still lacking a little bit in creativity, to be honest, but they've got some good young players that have brought in. A notable one, the defender Romagnoli, who they brought in from Roma. So they're buying some for the future. I think the problem they have really is finding the right manager and sticking with them long enough. Managers in Italy don't tend to last very long if the results aren't going great, and Italian football always has the sort of the negative parts about it, saying it's very defensive and it's not exciting football to watch. AC Milan were always the team to buck that trend, so Mihajlovic at the moment is doing okay. The problem I fear is whether he lasts the season. There's obviously Carlo Ancelotti is out there and is currently not working. So there's always a chance that maybe Carlo comes back. There is another club interested in him though, and that's Roma, because as well as they are doing, Rudi Garcia is by the board and the fans is deemed to be underachieving, and there's a lot of Roma fans that would like to see Ancelotti come back there. So there could be a fight in the hands for that one. But yeah, it's a case of stability and getting the right players in, because they just really haven't had the money, and they've invested in some bad players over the last sort of 5-6 years.
Fair enough.
Okay, so let's move the question now on to Drew. I believe you have a question for John as well.
I do, yeah. Just quick, John. I guess tactically speaking, you defend before you allow your opponent to get to your back four, and Fiorentina have the best defensive record in Serie A, if I'm not mistaken. And I think a lot of that has to do with the play of the Vecino, Valero, and Badelj. Those three seem to be doing a lot of the sort of what Fiorentina have going on right now is coming from their midfield. Do you think that's sustainable for them to actually keep themselves not just relevant in a title race, but relevant for a Champions League spot next season?
I'm not sure about the title race. The problem that some of the clubs have that are, say, not necessarily smaller in terms of history, but in squad size, is that they don't have the same depth. If Fiorentina pick up 1 or 2 injuries, then they're going to struggle a bit more. But whilst everyone's fit, they can certainly sustain it. Paulo Sousa hasn't really changed too much with the style of play. He's kept, like I said, the same system as Montella had in place before. They press a little bit more from the front, and they'll press for a certain amount of time and then drop off if they haven't won the ball back after a certain period of time. So he's changed it, he's tweaked it slightly. But yeah, those players in midfield are really key to protecting their defence. So if they can keep them fit, then yeah, they've certainly got a chance. But I would expect to see maybe, as injuries generally do tend to happen throughout the season, they might drop off a little bit. But I think they've got a good chance for the Champions League, certainly.
Okay.
Good stuff. Thank you very much for the question, Drew. And final question from Tom.
Yeah, this is just a question in terms of teams getting promoted from Serie B. When you look at it in comparisons like the Spanish League with how well the likes of Betis and Gijon have done in respect to their league, and also in the German League with Ingolstadt, Cologne and Darmstadt and how well they've done. When you compare it to the Italian League, the teams that have come up aren't doing too well. Is there a reason for that in terms of the quality spread throughout Serie A, or is it just because the teams that come up from Serie B just aren't as competitive as the likes of the second tiers of the Spanish and the German leagues?
Honestly, it's partly down to the Serie B and lower leagues aren't as competitive. There is some good managers there that have come up from Serie B with clubs, but the quality of players after a certain point there is a notable drop. If you can get the right players, I mean, like Empoli last season did very well because they had a very good manager who's now obviously he's gone to Napoli in Mauricio Sarri. But what they did was they utilised the loan market really well, and the systems and the way they played surprised a lot of teams. So if you can get the right manager and the players in, obviously that that goes without saying, then you're going to do well. But it's a case of that so many of the smaller clubs that come up are just underfunded in comparison with the other big teams. So there is a bit of a yo-yo effect. But Frosinone doing well at the moment. They took advantage of Juventus and got a draw there, which is an amazing result for them. And Carpi, although they set the manager, they had an immediate effect and actually got their first win of the season. So there's going to be a struggle, but when you're up against established Serie A teams like Udinese, who may struggle in the league, but they always do well, they have a great transfer network where they scout the right players and they make good money off the profits so they can reinvest into their team. So it's very difficult to compete with that. But yeah, I'd agree. It's not, the lower leagues aren't as competitive as, say, what you'd find in the Premier League or the Liga or the Bundesliga.
Cool. Fantastic. Thank you for the question, Tom. So that wraps up 4 of the 5. And the next segment will fall on my good self. So let's take a trip to France.
Maxwell toujours pour frapper le corner. Oh, quel geste! Quel geste! L'égalisation de Zlatan Ibrahimovic. 23e minute. Le 8e but cette saison du géant suédois. Et celui-là, c'est vraiment un but. Christophe à la Zlatan, l'extérieur du pied. Exceptionnel geste et égalisation du Paris Saint-Germain.
Okay, so let's go through what's going on in Ligue 1. So currently you'll be shocked to know that PSG are top of the league. I'm sure nobody is shocked by that news whatsoever, in fact, but they are indeed top of the league. But I want to highlight a couple of things that have happened since the start of the season, a couple of teams to look out for as well, and a couple of bits and bobs to mention. Let's pick up first of all on Nice, who are banging form at the moment. Side that have kind of been rebuilt, kind of rejuvenated in the summer. I don't think anyone expected them to be anywhere near where they are. Now, granted, they're only 8th, but winning their last 3 games straight, they're a team that just right now just kind of putting the afterburners on. But what can be said of Nice certainly can't be said of Marseille, who are languishing like right down the bottom end of the table, all the way down in 16th place, and out of 20 teams in Liga. That's a real concern for them. They fired the sort of Marmite Marcelo Bielsa. Or I say fired, he actually walked very early on at the start of the season, completely out of the blue, although a lot of people did kind of predict that El Loco would go. And he was replaced by the former Real Madrid man, Michel. And Marseille, it's been kind of a mixed bag, really. Drawing 2 and losing 2 of the last 4 hasn't helped. And indeed, in their last defeat away at PSG, we saw Zlatan Ibrahimovic net 2 penalties to claim that 2-1 win for PSG. And in doing so, he's made or has become the highest goal scorer in PSG's history. Now, granted, that isn't too long. PSG were only founded in 1970, so it's only a 45-year history. But Zlatan's 2 goals do indeed take the goal-scoring record to 110 goals, which surpasses the previous best of the Portuguese striker Pauleta, who had 109 goals to his name. So I'm sure we'll all say congratulations to Zlatan. Although I'm pretty sure a man of his ego doesn't need us telling him he's done well. So I'm sure he'd be delighted about that. We should also highlight a couple of teams that are doing some really good things. As the current standings in Liga go, PSG top on 23 points, but from second, Angers, who are joint with Caen on 18 points in second and third respectively. 2 sides that I don't think anyone really expected to be in the top 3, certainly not Angers, who were only promoted to Liga last season, and Caen, who are steadily building but have shipped 3 or 4 of their better players. So it's a bit of a surprise to see them flying high. We also, as you look down the table, you see some familiar names: St Etienne in 5th, Olympique Lyonnais in 6th, my beloved Lorient 9th, Monaco currently 10th and struggling a little bit. And a couple of big names down the bottom of the league again: Bordeaux 14th, Nantes 15th, and Montpellier, one of the most worrying of the lot, only a point above the relegation zone in 18th. And at the bottom 2, you find Troyes and Gazlec Ajaccio, who were both promoted last season. Probably a bit less of a surprise that they're down there. We should also highlight Rennes, who are very much a success story. They've moved stadiums. They've got their new stadium that they've moved into as of this season. They're currently flying in 4th position, which, again, I don't think anyone really expected once they opened the new stadium. I don't think it was really predicted that they would do so well. But the Route de Lorient Stadium has proved to be a blessing in disguise for them, and they've picked up some really good form. They've actually drawn their last 4 games straight, but don't let that fool you. Their form has been particularly good to keep them at that top end of the table. A couple of other things to mention as well. A little bit of talk about Alexandre Lacazette, who was linked with a lot of big money moves in this summer. None of them sort of failed to materialise, and he decided that he would stay in France. He decided that was the best place for him. He wanted to play for Lorient. I wish he wanted to play for Lyon in the Champions League, and he's doing so. Although Lyon are struggling, but he's struggling as well. He's really not found the goal trail. Missed a penalty again last week, but did actually get a goal from open play and celebrated it in real fashion. Looked like it was a weight off his shoulders. It was a bit of a bobbly finish, but nevertheless a goal to his name, and it was a goal that he very much needed to try and get or try and recapture some of the form of last season. It actually proved to be the winning goal against Rams, who are also another high flying side in 7th at the moment, which nobody predicted. And we should also highlight Edinson Cavani's return to form. Man who divides opinion. I know myself and John have opinions that he's certainly a bit of a flat track bully and flatters to deceive at the best of times. But in truth, he's been on fire this season. And although he still does miss his regular 5-yard tap-ins, and he does conceive to make the easiest finishes look impossibly difficult, he is banging in the goals, and firing PSG to the position they're in is no mean feat. Just to finish off on the French league, just a couple of players to look out for and a couple of people to keep an eye on. There's a couple of players, one by the name of Cheikh Ndoye, who plays for Angers. He's kind of a wide, tricky forward, very, very talented. I think if he keeps playing the way he is, he'll get a move sooner rather than later. Sofiane Boufal, who's the Lille standout attacking central midfielder for Lille, really come on leaps and bounds this season. Did commit a terrible dive last week to earn his side a penalty, which proved to be one of the goals that sealed the points for Lille over Montpellier. But don't let that put you off him. He's a hell of a talent. And also Floyd Aite, another one striker for Bastia, striker come winger, kind of speed merchant, cuts in off the wing, really good talent. And also mention for Claudio Beauvau, who in Alexandre Lacazette's sort of absence of form, he's really stepped up and is performing at high levels for Lyon. And on a sad note, we were robbed of the talents of Nabil Fekir, who's out for potentially 6 months with a sort of serious knee injury, and it looks like he won't return certainly before the end of the year, and hopefully in time for the Euros, but obviously those are approaching fast. So we wish Nabil all the best in getting his fitness back and his form back, because he's a real talent. I want to come to Danny on this league before we exit. Danny, you're a bit of a hipster on the French league as well. You follow High Flying Cannes, who are 3rd in the table. Talk to us a bit about how you came to like Cannes.
Well, I don't want to give my allegiances away too much, but people might know that there's a certain player who played for my one and true love, a certain Graham Rix, and he left Arsenal to go and play we let him go on loan to Brentford towards the end of his career, and then when his contract was up, he went, like a few people did, like Ricky Hill went over there, and Ricky Steen, he went over there. I think he played for Metz, and then Brian Rix went over there and played for Caen, whose name I always pronounce wrong. And just since that point, I always like to try and have some connection between the teams that I support. Like my German team, lower league, is Fortuna Cologne, because Tony Woodcock went and played for them. And it's just nice to support a team that were basically rubbish. They were the stereotypical yo-yo team for so many years. And then last season, we had a really good season. We had a couple of players on loan. One of them was our top goal scorer. Unlike you, I can't name every single player who plays for the team at the moment. I could probably name a handful of them. And I'm looking at Wikipedia now, so I can name every single one if you want. Yeah, but it's just nice to see, like you're saying, with Marseille and Montpellier and Toulouse and all those other teams I can just about pronounce all down the bottom of the league. It revitalises a league that many people tend to ignore. You get some really good games in there, apart from the fact that PSG are going to win it now and every year for the next 1,000 years, because the amount of money. I mean, Monaco tried for a little while to try and take them on, and then they just went, no, we can't bother, we can't do this. They sold everybody, and now that they're falling apart. But yeah, it's a great league to watch, and I really like it. Yeah. I've got a question for you, though.
Yeah, far away.
What's all this shenanigans about there being only 2 relegation spots? Some websites say there's 3, like there was last year. Some say there's 2. And I was talking to someone on Twitter about this the other day, and he said there's no way it's going to be 2. It's definitely going to be 3. What do you know about it?
Well, truth be told, you've kind of summed it up perfectly there. There's a lot of talk. I mean, 2 is what's officially happening. There is sort of talk that it's going to be 3. Some people say no, it's going to switch to 2. I think from what I can gather, there's talk with the French FA that there was a big issue of the team like coming up, Gazalec Ajaccio, for example. Their ground wasn't really up to standard, and there was a concern about the teams that were coming up. Were they actually going to continue putting so many clubs up and down? The most recent sort of quote, or the most recent quote that we heard was back in May. The LFP president, Frederic Tiras, said that there's 3 up, 3 down is too many. Those who invest in football must be subject to permanent threat of relegation. 2 down out of 20 clubs is good. So that's how it stands right now. I mean, could that change? Who knows? I think probably for the sake of what's going on at the moment, it would be sensible to leave things well alone. But as you know, in football, Danny, anything can change at any time. So that's very much one to watch.
Because there was talking about what you were saying about our team's good enough to come up. There was a team that just about, I can't remember whether, I think it was this recently, that a team was, they got promoted. I think there was an ex-Premier League player had something to do with it. And then they got promoted to either Ligue 1 or Ligue 2. And the league then said, nope, you're not allowed to get promoted for some reason or another. So they just completely disbanded the club. Do you know what that club that was, or what league it was? Were they in the National League?
Are you thinking of? You're not thinking of Nantes, are you?
No,
not
definitely
Nantes.
not. It was a team I'd never heard of.
No, there you go. There's one to look up because you've stumped me there. So there you go. I know the story, but I can't think of the club off the top of my head.
But it was just quite sad because I remember seeing on one of the transfer sites I go and have a look at that every single player had been released from the club, and I thought that's a strange thing to do. Before usually it's the 1st of June, 1st of July they all go, and this was at the end of May. Went and did a bit of research, Wikipedia'd it, and then it turned out they'd been virtually robbed. They put all their efforts into it. They said no, your stadium isn't big enough. You're not going up. They said disband the club.
It's kind of a situation like what happens in England as well that we'll be familiar with, whereby you have teams that don't have the right stadia to get a promotion essentially, and they're essentially told until your stadium becomes suitable to be promoted, we won't consider you going up. And it's as you say, it's a shame because you've got clubs that are working hard to build a future for themselves, and before you know it, they're ripped away. So we'll do some research on that, and we'll have. It wasn't Valence, by the way, was it? Are you thinking of?
No, I've heard of them because that's who was it? Carlos Valderrama used to play for.
Yeah, they were back in 2005 is when they disbanded. But I wondered if that was the only one I could think that came to mind. But yeah, we will do some research if nothing else.
I have a feeling that Frank Leboeuf might have had something to do with it.
There you go. Well,
Frankie Beef, as he's known to his mates.
Frankie Beef. There's one for everyone to look up. We had another couple of quick questions before we come back to you, Danny, for the best of the rest. Jake, I believe you have a question.
Yeah, it's just about Monaco. We all saw in the last few years that they did their best Manchester City, Chelsea, PSG impression by trying to sign anyone over £35 million. The question I had was, I saw recently that they were, I think one of the club execs came out and said that they were going to try and do things in a different way to keep themselves at the cream of the crop in France, but it was going to be, they were going to try and follow more of the Porto and Ajax model by, selling off young quality while staying up near the top of the league. Now, do you think, if that is correct, do you think that they'd be able to do that in France because the very top end quality isn't as like like what happens in Germany, what Drew mentioned with like the top from 2 to 7 usually chop and change. Do you think Monaco would be able to survive being one of the top 4 clubs in France if they went with that model?
I think it's a difficult one, to be honest with you, Jake, because the French league is very much a sort of PSG and everybody else. And as much as Lyon pushed last year, and as much as you said Monaco pushed with the money they had previously, money only gets you so far. Players want success and they want to be playing at the sort of fashionable clubs. And you've seen what happened with Falcao, and obviously Moutinho is still there at the moment. But I think Monaco can survive as a club and do things the right way. I mean, this season alone, they're bringing through young talent. They've got Ronnie Lopez. They've got Bernardo Silva, who's a real sort of footballing superstar, up and coming. They're also bringing through Lamar is another one who's doing very good things. So I mean, they have got the potential to bring in sort of younger players and bring them through and survive. But to challenge at the very top level, that's a real tough one. I think they can probably be one of the best of the rest, but they're a little bit behind, is the truth be told, and I can't see anyone challenging PSG while PSG have got the monopoly money wise, and yeah, the manager they've got there as well. I think he's doing the right thing in sort of rebuilding, and if they are going to do things the right way, I think they've got the right coach. Leonardo Jardim is the gentleman in question, and he seems to be getting his philosophy across and bringing through the right players in the right systems. But to challenge PSG, you need money, and I just don't think that realistically they're ever going to be top challengers to the league while things are in place, and while things are with the way they are with PSG. Hopefully that answers that question for you.
Yes, indeed.
Danny, you've done some research, I believe, just before I go to Drew's question. It was actually Luzniak, wasn't it? Or Luzinac, I should say.
That's the Badger. Yeah, it was Fabien Barthez. There you go. I knew it was a Frenchman who'd played in the Premier League. And yeah, it just turns out that they were a very, very small side, village side, population of 650 people up in the Pyrenees. And I was just looking at the league table, and it turns out they'd finished second in the Ligue Nationale, which is the third division.
Yep.
And they had 3 points clear of the team in third place, and only 2 points behind the winners. And then they were told at the end of the season, no, your ground isn't big enough. So they just went, that's it, folded. And now they are no longer in existence, or they haven't played a game. It says here the last game they played was a club friendly in July 2014, and then all the next season was cancelled, and that's it. Very sad, really.
It is, yeah.
650 people in a village, though, to get that far is an achievement. It just shows that no matter how much you try, unless you've got massive, if they'd have had a billionaire backer, they'd have bought their way up. But their stadium had a capacity of 5,000, which I think was mostly all standing.
Yeah.
Bit sad, really.
It is, yeah, and that's not a small stadium either, is it? I mean, for that amount of people to fold a club, it's terrible, really, it really is. But that's modern football, unfortunately. Just before we shoot on, then, Drew, you had a quick question as well.
Yeah, just real quick. So Nice have the most goals of any club in Ligué, and it's only 8 matches, but they have 10 players who have found the back of net this season. So would you think that's enough for them to continue their charge up the table, or do they need to tighten up at the back because they have shipped in 11 goals?
Yeah, they definitely need to tighten up at the back. Needs to kind of working on that kind of flair principle of, if you score 4, we'll score 5. They've got some really talented players, sort of players that are having a bit of a resurgence, no more so than Hatim Ben Arfa, who's having a complete renaissance in his career and is tearing up trees once again. Also, a lad I've really always liked, and he's finding his way now is Valery Germain, who's very, very good form this season. 4 goals in 8 games. He's previously off Monaco, signed in the summer, and he's really transformed their forward line. But to answer your question, I mean, they've got some young players at the back mixed with some experience of players that are not great. I do like Le Marchand, who's one of their centre-backs, but they are shipping goals. And I think if they're going to continue this push, if you look at their last 3 results, for example, 3-1 away at Bastia, 6-1 at home to Bordeaux, that was a bit of a freak result, and 4-1 away at St Etienne. And if you haven't seen it already, look up Ben Arfa's goal in that game. That they really are a team that's on the charge. My concern with Nice would be, is it all based on momentum, and will they get found out? And I think probably they will get found out eventually. But as they're going now, enjoy the ride. As you say, higher scorers in Liga, they're entertainment, and they're worth flicking over for. And it sort of puts pay to the fact that you only get 1 goal a game in French football. So fingers crossed they can keep it going. But if I had to put money on it, I think they'll probably level out as the games go on. Right, so that kind of wraps things up for all things Liga. Again, we'll keep you in touch with things as they develop each week. Danny, just a very quick roundup of the best of the rest across Europe for me. And indeed the world, I should say.
Yes, indeed. Well, we had a little chat about this, and we said, well, we'll just go and have a look through the other leagues, and every week we pick a different league, a few handfuls. So you just give me a shout when you want me to stop. Right, first of all, I'll start off with the hipster's choice, which seems to be at the moment for players and fans, is the Turkish league. Personally, my team in there is Trabzonspor, and again, an Arsenal link. Kevin Campbell went to play there, did quite well until they sacrificed a chicken in front of him, and then he said, I don't really like this anymore, I want to leave. He got loaned to Everton, scored 8 goals in 7 games, and the rest is history. So this summer, this all made a lot of people laugh. The Fenerbahce went and spent over €30 million on Robin van Persie, Nani, and Kier. But then they got knocked out of the Champions League in the third qualifying round to Shakhtar Donetsk of Ukraine, or is it Russia?
Yeah, Ukraine, yeah.
Always get those two mixed up, which is not very good. And now they're third in the Super League in Turkey, and RVP is not a happy man according to reports. I think the little boy in him wants to come home. Besiktas are 2 points ahead of Galatasaray, and the ex-Bayern Munich goal machine, Mario Gomez, who I think one season scored 26 goals in about 32 games for Bayern not that long ago. He's the top goal scorer in the Turkish league. He has 6 goals in 7 games. So, yeah, I'm surprised there's not more of the Turkish league shown on TV. Does BT show much of it? Because I don't have BT.
No, I think, from memory, it's something to do with the rights. I think there's a bit of an issue with commercial packages, I think. I may be wrong on that.
There's a surprise.
Yeah.
And who pays the price? The fans do.
Indeed.
Next up, one of my other favourite leagues for many, many moons. I remember back to the Scottish leagues in the days when it was Rangers v Celtic and had all the English players up there. And my team up there is Celtic. I shouldn't keep telling people all my teams, but it is Celtic. Another Arsenal link, David O'Leary, Arsenal legend. His brother Pierce O'Leary, which not many people know about. He played for Celtic for quite a while. And it was a really interesting season this season. Celtic walked the league last season because there's no competition whatsoever. But strangely enough, Aberdeen, the Dons, they had the first 8 games this season. They won the lot, and including the 8th game was actually against Celtic, and I think they beat them 3-1, something like that. It was a really good game. So I think I've seen a few of their Celtic games this season. They've not been so good in the Champions League. Got knocked out at the early stages by I think Malmo and an ex-player. Was it Malmo?
Yes.
Yes, it was. A bearded gentleman who was on loan at them. I think he scored a goal against them, and now they're not doing too bad in the WAFA Cup, which is good to see. So now Aberdeen are top of the league. But they've lost their last 2 games, which is a little bit weird. So Celtic are catching them up, and Celtic are now only 1 point behind them. But Hearts in third place are 6 points behind Celtic. So already it's beginning to look like a little bit of a 2-horse race. But more interesting, Rangers, who, if people don't know, they got done because of financial irregularities, wonky ownership. We're not pointing any fingers because we don't know better. But they were relegated from the Premiership down to the 4th tier, which they won, and they won the 3rd tier. And last season they stuttered a little bit. Ali McCoy's left, and so they didn't get promoted. But Rangers at the moment, they are top of the Scottish First Division, which is the 2nd tier. Played 9, won 9. They're smashing everybody who comes near them. They're 9 points ahead of 2nd place Wraith Rovers at the moment already. So it looks like next season, hopefully, we'll have Rangers, Celtic and Aberdeen, because it makes me sad when you see that the Scottish League isn't as big as it used to be, because it wasn't that long ago that Rangers paid Chelsea about £10 million for Tor Andre Flo.
Oh, crikey.
And they had Gary Stevens, Trevor Seams, had the De Boer brothers were there, Gazza was there, Mark Haitley, Ray Wilkins, half the England team was playing in Scotland, Terry Butcher, of course. Now, another interesting league, maybe you can stop me whenever you want, is it's a quick jaunt across the many oceans to Brazil, which is another league that I've followed for quite a while.
Yes, and give us Brazil and give us MLS, if you don't mind, as well.
Okie dokie. There's 9 games to go in the season. My team, Corinthians, who are 5 points clear at the top, ahead of Atletico, and they look like they're on course for their first title since 2011. It's been a little bit close between those two this season, but Corinthians have had a bit of a good run at the moment, because after winning the title in 2011, they then went on to win the Copa Libertadores, which is the South American version of the Champions League. And considering about 2 seasons before that had been relegated, or 3 seasons before, it's amazing how you can do that. It tends to be the way. You get relegated in South American football, 2 years later you come back and win the Champions League, their version. Anyway, so top scorer in Serie, which is what they call their league, the same as the Italian version, is ex-AC Milan striker Ricardo Oliveira. He's 35 years old, got 17 goals in 27 games, so not Portugal, not Russia. MLS. And finally down to MLS. Most of the teams have 2 or 3 games left to go in the regular season, because then the top 2 in each division then go through to the finals, and then I think the next 4 in each division play off against each other, and it's all kinds of shenanigans. It's really hard to work out. Even Pythagoras once had a go and couldn't figure it out. So there's only one team that's guaranteed a spot in the final stages at the moment, which is New York Red Bulls, and weirdly Bradley Wright Phillips, son of the legendary Ian Wright, last season he scored I think 29 goals all season. He's only got 15 this season, but I think they're more. Sean Wright-Phillips has gone and joined him there after he was let go by QPR. There's only 4 teams now that cannot make the playoffs in any way, which is New York City with Frank Lampard, with Pirlo, and with David Silva. David Silva? David Villa. Yeah.
They wish.
No, I was just reading that David Silva is injured for Man City on international duty, which is and Aguero's injured, so that's going to be an interesting week when they all come back. So Philadelphia Union, Chicago Fire, and Colorado Rapids. I think the way I've worked it out, none of those can get enough points to get even in the playoffs. And a bloke called Kamara is the top goal scorer with 22 goals in 31 games. But probably for me, the best player playing in that league is Giovinco.
Yeah.
Am I saying his name right?
Yeah, Giovinco, yeah.
You know, people get used to this. I have an uncanny habit of ruining people's names. And he's got 21 goals in, I think, 30 games. So there you go. There's a few leagues to go and watch and look out for, because there's brilliant football no matter where you watch it.
Absolutely, yeah. And I can confirm, as a Chicago Fire fan, we definitely cannot make the playoffs.
But the Timbers can.
Come on, Timbers. Can you also just very briefly just bring us up to speed on Portugal? We will cover in more depth at a later date. But can you just briefly touch on this incident between Juan Jesus, former Benfica manager, now Sporting manager? What's going on there?
Well, as you're saying, Jorge Jesus, he was Benfica manager, and he's now left them to go and be the manager of Sporting Lisbon, which is both of them are Bobby Robson's old teams, I think. And Benfica were demanding €7.5 million for poaching their manager. So at the moment in the Portuguese league, top of the league is Porto and Sporting with 17 points, and his old club Benfica now I think in 3rd or 4th place. So I'm not sure if that £7.5 million thing has been resolved, because I could only read websites that were done in English, and most of them were saying June, July, August this year, so I couldn't find anything for October. But it's a little bit like moving from Man City to Man United, or moving from Everton to Liverpool, because the amount of rivalry over there, and they don't take kindly to it. And that league is it's a pretty good league. There's if you're Brazilian, it's a good league, because if you're Brazilian, they'll buy you. They'll buy any Brazilians going, and they'll just then keep you for a while and flog you to Chelsea for 50 million a little while later. But the top goal scorer there is Jonas Oliveira, who has scored 7 goals in 6 games. So I expect him to move to some Premier League team for 50 million quid in the January transfer window,
very soon,
and then be loaned back quite soon after.
Yeah, absolutely. We should say as well that a player for Benfica is likely to feature in a future episode, so stay tuned for that one. Right, well, that brings us up to date. We've been very in-depth on this podcast today with regards to the leagues in Europe. Don't expect it every week, fans. I'm afraid it's going to be a little bit finer trimmed, a little bit more punchy and a bit snappier in future weeks. But obviously, this is the first ever podcast we've done together as a crew, so we wanted to cover every base and really give people a flavour for some of our passion for our individual leagues. So, in future, it'll probably be a bit shorter. Right, so let's move on to our final 2 subjects, and then we'll do some listener questions, and then we'll give your ears a rest. So we're going to do another subject now, or another segment, I should say now, called the Hipster's Choice. Now, this is something we're going to do on a weekly basis, whereby I will select a player that we will all do some research on, and we'll all have a read up on, and then we will deliver that player to you on a platter in your earballs, and you can go away and watch that player in action and report back to us. So the idea is, have a look at him, see how he performs, and then send us some tweets on how you think he is and how good a player he might be. So without further ado, our first player is... It's Kingsley Coman, and this is a young player who is coming through the ranks at Bayern Munich. Now, I should say coming through the ranks is technically incorrect, because he signed for Bayern Munich on loan from Juventus this summer. He's a 19-year-old winger. He's French, or playing for France, to Guadeloupean parents. I presume is how you say Guadeloupean. He's 5'10", weighing roughly 157 pounds, and he wears a number 29 shirt. For Bayern Munich. His position is kind of a wide forward. Now, he came through the PSG youth system. He's actually the youngest player ever to play for PSG at age 16, plus 8 months and 4 days. For those of you keeping check, he signed for Juventus on a 5-year contract in the summer of 2014, making 22 appearances. appearances for the club before going on loan to Bayern Munich in the summer of 2015, this past summer on August the 30th. He scored his first goal for Bayern just a week, 10 days or so ago. And made an immediate impact, actually. 6 games, 2 goals, and Bayern's sort of style of fast counter-attacking football under Guardiola seems to suit him perfectly. He's also scored 2 goals in 9 games for the French under-21s. And for those of you boot nerds, OG, I'm looking at you. He wears the Nike Mercurial Superfly boots. So there you go. You can look that up if you like. I just want to come to all of you individually. And just get your sort of thoughts on if you've got any views on the player, and more importantly, whether you think he'll be a success. I'm going to start with John, because John will have seen a little bit of him at Juventus. John, what's your thoughts, and do you think he's got the potential to be a hipster of the future?
Yeah, he's definitely got the potential. He didn't make many appearances for Juventus. It was just a full team. Many of those were as a sub. And he scored the 1 goal. It was in the Coppa Italia, if my memory is correct. Against Verona. So, he did well there, and he was well thought of. It was a little bit of a surprise that they let him go in the end. I think there's a bit of pressure on Allegri to keep the performances up, to keep winning titles in Serie, and to keep pushing in the Champions League after reaching the final last season. So it was a case of, whilst he has talent, they have to have immediate success on the pitch at Juve. Is sort of what is expected. They perhaps don't have the same room that a club like Bayern Munich do to develop players and give them playing time. So there was a bit of quite a bit of disappointment that Juve let him go. And I know there was a lot of talk of obviously Vidal left from Juve as well to join Bayern Munich on a permanent deal. That Vidal was very excited and really trying to encourage him to come and join him at Bayern Munich, because Munich have the option to, I think it's within the 2 years, they have an option to buy him for, I think it's around 21 million at any point. Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see if and when Bayern Munich pull the trigger on that clause in the 2-year loan deal. But he's a really exciting player. Got real pace, very good dribbler with the ball. So being at a club of that stature at Bayern Munich, he's already come on as a sub in the Champions League final last year against Barcelona for Juventus as well. So he's played in some big games. A lot's expected of him, and the fact that he's already got PSG, Juventus, and now Bayern Munich on his club career of teams he's played for is quite impressive at such a young age. So, expect big things from him in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I know obviously that certain players are going to be more familiar to our hipsters than others. So I just want to get brief answers from the rest of you guys. Tom, I'll come to you. Hipster of the future for you, or overhyped?
Oh, no, he's certainly got the talent to be a star of the future. I mean, I saw him in the game when he played against Olympiacos, and he came on, did really well. I mean, there was obviously elements of his game where he looked quite raw, where he took a snapshot and he went wide and elements like that. But you can really see that he has just absolute blistering pace, and he can get past almost any player. And he's still got the technical ability where he can take the ball past a couple of players and actually set up Mario Götze for the goal. He also isn't like one of the smaller rapid players. He has got a bit of a presence about him still, and it's something that does bode well in the Bundesliga. And Pep Guardiola obviously likes him, because you saw his reaction at the end of the game where he ran up and pointed at him going, you did well. You did well tonight. So it's good to see. It's good he's got the confidence of the manager on his side, and I really can't see them letting him go back to Juve without activating that release clause.
Good stuff. And Drew, as a Bundesliga fan, does he excite you, or again, do you think it's a flash in the pan?
I think he has the ability. I think moving forward, the question with him, it's going to be twofold. One, if Juve want to bring him back and not sort of part ways with him financially, and if they can sort of fit him into what their system is, because clearly he's been doing much better for Bayern than he was for Juve, and so that's the first thing. The second thing is, when Pep eventually leaves Bayern, because he's not going to be there forever, will the next manager incoming play a system that brings the best out of him? Because currently they have such freedom at Bayern, especially in attacking sense, that fits the kind of player he is. Previously, Bayern's wingers up until injuries, and then other players coming to the club were Ribery and Robin, and both those players were technically gifted, like to be on the ball, and they were pacey, and Coleman is exactly that kind of player. So you replaced one of those guys with him, and they didn't lose a beat with it. And he fits that system. You look at the numbers that he's put up since going. 2 goals, 3 assists, and I think it's six appearances in all competitions for Bayern since going there as a 19-year-old. That's fantastic. But I think a lot of that has to do with the way that they play. So if a new manager comes in and sort of instills a different approach, you might seem to have to adjust. And then I think you'll get all your questions answered about the kind of player is he adaptable, or can he only play one type of football? But one thing I would like to point out is that if he does keep showing for Bayern, and if he did truly break into the 11 despite players coming back fit, you might even see him feature for France in Euro 2016. So we'll see. But I think the ability is there. It's just a matter of if he fits the system, a different system based off of who manages.
Yeah, good shout on the Euros, by the way. Good shout on the Euros. And just to finish, quick thoughts from Jake and quick thoughts from Danny. Jake, do you think he potentially could be a winner, or are you more inclined to think that it's kind of wait and see?
No, I think he's got all the attributes to be a good player. It's all about attitude, and he's showing quite a good one at the moment. I will say I had seen more of him at Juve than I have seen at Bayern, and by that I'd only seen very brief bits of him at Juve even so. But the things I did notice, when you're in quoted commas, a football hipster, you pick up on things when you like to scout players and see how they do, and they bring their attention to you when you watch the games. And a few of the things I did notice is he's quite strong on the ball, and he really he's got a ton of tricks as well. Like John mentioned, he's got a great turn of pace, but I also saw that he's quite fond of coming in off his right shoulder and dipping in off and providing crosses and dribbles and things of that nature. And I'll wrap up by saying he has a sweet rat tail.
Very good. And Danny, just to wrap us up, are you excited or a bit meh?
It's just another one of those French wonder kids, isn't it? I mean, when I first saw him, I thought, bloody hell, Pogba's let himself go. And it turns out it wasn't Pogba. And it's an interesting fact that he's right-footed. He's dominantly on the right wing, but he can play in the hole behind the striker. He can play the left-hand side. But most players at this age, when they're just a raw talent, you could put him at right back and he'd have the game of his life. But the interesting thing that I see that no one else has mentioned, that when he went from PSG to Juventus, they only paid him €750,000 roughly, so that's something about £600,000.
Yeah, cheap.
And so then they've got a loan fee of €7 million euros. So that's going to be about £6.5 million on that. So they're not doing bad business at all. And oddly, he looks like he could be. I don't know any player that's done this. I know when you play in the Premier League, you've got to play 10 games and then you get a medal. His first season with PSG, 1 game, they won the title. Second season, 2 games, they won the title. He goes to Juventus. His first season, 14 games, they won the title. He's now at Bayern Munich. He's going to win the title again. So that means he's won the title 3 years in a row with 3 different countries with 3 different clubs. That is amazing. There's players that play their entire career and don't get one, and he's had 3 in 3 at the age of 19.
There you go. Now,
and I think the French squad with him, Martial and Coquelin are going to be something else. They're going to be amazing.
Yeah, not forgetting, fingers crossed on Fekir. It's be quite an attacking lineup.
Yeah, Fekir is the man that makes Lacazette the man. I nearly said Lacazette. Lacazette the man makes the man that Lacazette is.
Yeah, absolutely. Certainly helps. That's for sure. Okay, good stuff. So there you go. So that's Kingsley Coman. Look him up. He's on loan up to Bayern Munich. Have a watch. Give us your thoughts. Tweet us how you feel about him, and share your views. And we'll actively encourage that moving forwards. So our final segment before we go to a couple of listeners' questions is a bit of a random one. We're going to start something called the Bert Patenaude Hipster Legend Hall of Fame. Now this is, as you probably guessed from that name, a Hall of Fame segment where each week we will quote unquote induct somebody from the past that we feel is a bit of a legend and a bit of a hipster legend into our own Hall of Fame. I'm going to cross to John first of all, who's going to explain the name behind this person, and then I'm going to cross to Danny as well, who'll give you a bit more flesh on the bone. So, John, who is this gentleman? And then Danny, explain to us why he's famous.
I actually thought you were crossing to Danny for that. You completely caught me off guard now.
He did tell me before we started, he told me to get the Wikipedia page up of him. But John, tell us why we picked him, what you, me and Kris did the other night, what we were trying to be clever with.
Yeah, well, we decided to do this Hall of Fame section, and we were trying to pick a player who was sort of the hipster, one of the first in existence, if you like. So we thought the easiest way to do it would be to look up the first World Cup and look up some facts. And so we were looking through the 1930 World Cup, and Bert is his name, or Bertrand Arthur Paternood, was a player for the USA. And the reason why we picked him was because he's the first player in a World Cup ever to score a hat-trick. There was a few other names that we sort of mulled over, but we thought we'd pick him because he's got quite an amazing career and some really amazing stats. But I'll pass to Danny because if you've listened to anything we've done before, you'll know that Danny's our stat man. So I'll let you give him the stats on the guy.
With the help of Wikipedia, yeah, we come up with all kind of ideas, like the first person to score a goal, and we thought, that's not very good. And then John went, first hat trick. Then we found out he was American, so we were a little bit dubious because we know they don't overly like their football until recent years. But yeah, on the 17th of July 1930, the USA were playing Paraguay, who at the time were a footballing powerhouse because didn't they go on and win the World Cup that year? Or was it Uruguay? I always get those two mixed up.
No, it was Uruguay. Uruguay won it twice, didn't they?
I knew it was some guy. Hey!
Very good.
Anyway, so it was the very first World Cup, and he scored the opening goal in the 10th minute, his second goal in the 15th minute, and he had to be credited in 7 different ways by an own goal to another player, and a regular goal to one of his teammates, or as his second goal. But it decided that they to give him the goal overall because I think they looked back at goal line technology in 1930, and they had no chance at all. But weirdly, he only ever played 4 games for the USA. All in 1930, scored 6 goals in 4 games, which was back then you had low. If you look back for your history books, you'll see that especially for England, you'd have players that would score 14 goals in 8 games, and then they went back to work in a munitions factory or something. Yeah, but he was born in Fall River, Massachusetts, USA in 1909, 4th of November, and oddly enough, he died on his birthday in 1974, aged 65. So that saved the people who do the tombstone a little bit of time. They just ditto underneath it. He played for Philadelphia Field Club and then J&P Coats. I don't know if that's a coat makers. Then the Fall River Marksmen. Because back in the old days of American football, it used to be... I don't know the right way to put it. Like you'd have an Italians league, and then you'd have a team full of Irishmen, and that would be another league. So that's where all these names come from. Because I looked into that, and it's quite interesting. There's so many teams that started up, but he played for Fall River Marksmen from 28 to 31, and he scored 112 goals in 114 games. And then he went off to play for Philadelphia German Americans, like I was just saying. Yeah, so he played for them for a couple of years, and then he went to play for St. Louis Breweries. Again, I don't know if it's a shop or whether it's a company. 21 in 24, and then he finished his career in 1936 at the Philadelphia Passon, Passon. So I haven't pronounced that wrong. With 24 goals in 22 games, and just looking at pictures of him on Google, just like a thoroughly upstanding young man with a bit of a cheeky look and some lovely greasy hair. You know, they get the comb and they put stuff in it and comb it all back, don't they?
Bit of Bill Cream for all of us.
I think he was the Clint Dempsey of his day.
but less rapping, hopefully.
Yeah, so we hope that people may go and have a look at it. And the first man to ever score a World Cup hat trick.
There you go. See, you learn something there. And if dying on your birthday isn't hipster, I don't know what is. So, without further ado, our first entry into the Paternood Hipster Legend Hall of Fame is... Dennis Bergkamp. And the reason we've picked Dennis Bergkamp, for those of you that will know a bit about us and the sort of people that make up this podcast, you'll know that we might have a little bit of an affinity for this gentleman. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the timer on again, so to speak. Not going to be quite as rigid this time, but I just want to give you all a couple of minutes, just 2 minutes, just to share one memory of Dennis Bergkamp each. And let's start with Tom.
Are we off?
Yes, off you go.
We're off. Okay, yeah, Dennis Bergkamp. What can I say? The man, for me, was the most technically gifted player to ever play for Arsenal Football Club. The man was so spatially aware of what was around him when he played. He seemed to be 2 steps ahead, let alone one, of any play that was going on. He'd see a man that was through a crowd of people and pick him out. At the same time, being surrounded by a group of players, he'd do the right drag back, the right turn, the right spin to get the ball away and get it still out of his feet, so then he could then play the pass that he needed to, or shoot at the goal, or do whatever he needed to do to help the team. It was weird how when he came from Inter Milan, it was such an audacious buy for Arsenal Football Club, and it was touted to be a failure before it even begun. And what a mistake that turned out to be. For the Dutch national team, I just remember the goal that he scored where he just touched it down after I think it was like a 40-yard pass. I can't remember who the person was who played it, and he just smashed it in. And I can't have enough adjectives to describe a player without like repeating myself over again. But honestly, if you want to know what a player is with complete technical ability and complete spatial awareness, go look up Dennis Bergkamp.
Absolutely well said. Frank de Boer was the man who pinged it over the top, and if you haven't yet, I would encourage you, in fact we'll put it on our website, a little audio clip of a Dutch commentator going mental at that goal in the World Cup. Well worth a watch. Let's go to Drew. Drew, give us your thoughts on the great Dennis.
For me, I think he was an ideal role model for young players who watched him when I started playing. I started playing when I was 6, so in 1990. But by that point, maybe a couple of years later, I'd started to really get into the sport quite a bit. And some of my first coaches that ever seriously coached me had experience with the Ajax training system, through their experiences playing. So when I finally sort of got my taste of, the Dutch way of playing the sport, and got to see, Ajax and Feyenoord and PSV and all that, Dennis sort of just stood on his own. He scored some absolutely brilliant goals for Ajax, and we saw that carry over for Arsenal and for the Dutch national team. And Tom brought it up, just that goal versus Argentina in '98. I remember exactly where I was, like what time of the day. I was at a bar in Midtown with my then best friend's family. We were all sitting down there watching the match, and then that touch came, and we all just stood up, like eyes gouging out, like no way. And then it happened, and we all just like lost it, and then Ian and I went back for the next week. We all tried to recreate that goal at training, like a bunch of 14-year-old kids trying to do that. And you could maybe do your own version of it, but it's never just the same. The reason why I like him so much as a player, because a lot of the people that I played with, a lot of people that coached me used to say that I was so good at making hard things look simple and making the simple things look even simpler. I think Dennis sort of did that, but I think that's where I got my inspiration for that. He was always so cool on the ball whenever he played. He had vision that no one else could really imagine. And we sort of said about Mesut Ozil now. I'm at Arsenal, but even Ozil's not even in the same stratosphere as Bergkamp was. There are certain players who sort of mold a generation in a sport, and I think Bergkamp sort of really did that. In his playing years, and I think a lot of things you see now from creative players, I think a lot of that definitely came from some of the stuff we saw Bergkamp do. So, just my 2 cents on that.
Yeah, fantastic. Some good stuff there. And let's go to John. What's your thoughts, John?
It's hard to sort of top of what the guys have already said. Everyone knows about the guy's ability on the ball and what he does, what he can do with it. But one of the things Drew touched on there is how easy he made it look. I think Dennis Bergkamp was one of the first players that I saw regularly would just do this little move where he'd have the ball at his feet and he'd just sort of tap it to the right of his body, just like half a yard, just so he could open his body up and just curl it into the top corner. And you always see him sort of do this thing where he'd just get the ball, just roll it slightly to the right, just open his body up, bang, top corner. And you do it over and over again. And the first time you see it, it's amazing. You jump out your seat and you're all excited. But then when you watch it back on the replay, you look at it and you go, oh, well, yeah, that's obvious. If you just hit the ball and just curl it away from the goalkeeper and then back in, that's the easiest way to score. He's never going to save it. It just made everything look so simple and so easy. The way he created not just space but time to dwell on the ball until the person who was making a run for him so he could hit the pass at the right time. Things like that. I remember a goal. I can't remember who it was against, but he just sort of kind of did a little 360 on the ball, just sort of spinning around it to keep space on it, waiting for Freddie Ljungberg to make a run in the box.
Juventus.
Just to do a little dink. Just wonderful. Just waiting. No rush, no pressure. Look completely calm. There's certain players in every generation, as Drew said, that can do that, and Dennis is one of those that you can put up there with the likes of, some of my personal favourites like Zidane and Nedved and players like that who can just do amazing things with the football, but they don't look like they're taxed by it. It looks completely natural. It's as natural to them as breathing is to anyone else. It's really impressive.
Yeah, brilliantly summed up. Jake, your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm actually kind of glad that nobody really covered this one specific moment too in depth or at all. But for me, one of the, I don't know, but as long as I live, I'm always going to remember the goal he scored against Newcastle, where he's just absolutely dumbfounded the defender, kicked the ball, or just gave the ball the slightest touch one way and ran the other. The defender didn't know which way he was going to go, and it was just, and then the composure to just slot it the bottom right corner. It just, if there was ever a 6-second Vine clip to sum up Dennis Bergkamp, that'd have to be the one for me. It was just elegance and brilliance in such a short amount of time, and to even think that out in the space of time that he did, and then pull it off and score it's just marvelous. It's fantastic. It's just those little things in football that guys like us, we all live and breathe and die for. So that was a great moment for me. Also, he was a lot stronger than people give him credit for, and a lot more feisty than most would notice, because he was such an artist with the football that you do sometimes forget that he was he wasn't afraid of a red card, shall we say. But those of the Arsenal fandom will have absolutely no qualms about that, because the constant elegance and ability and all the stuff that came along with his brilliance put little things like that by the wayside, and it was just such a fantastic journey to have him at an English club. And he was, nope, I'm not going to even finish that stat because I'm not sure if it's 100% correct. But we'll say that at his testimonial at the opening of the Emirates was another really great occasion. And you could make an entire podcast dedicated to the man, and I think that says everything hipster can say.
Absolutely, elegance and brilliance is two very good words, and I'm sure that Nikos Davids still has nightmares to this day. And Danny, Danny, finally, just give us your quick thoughts on the great man.
Being an Inter Milan fan and a bit of an Ajax fan, I remember when I think his very first game for Ajax, he come on for the legendary Johan Cruyff at half-time, or is either that or Van Basten did. But I remember then going to Inter Milan and thinking he's going to be brilliant there. He had a fantastic run in the UEFA Cup, did rubbish in the league, won the UEFA Cup with Inter Milan, and then we signed him. And then that pre-season, we played 7 pre-season games and he scored 8 goals. I mean, admittedly, some of against the likes of, just checking Andy King's website here, the ArsenalHistory.com, and he says hat-trick against St Albans and a hat-trick against Kristianstad of Sweden. But then I didn't realise until I've just checked it up, his very first game for Arsenal, 1-1 draw against Middlesbrough. I was there. His very last game for Arsenal, 4-2 win over Wigan at Highbury. I was there, and then like Jake was just saying, the opening of the Emirates was against a Dutch 11, and I was there for that as well. So I'm just having a bit of a moment here when I realised I saw his first, his last, and then his last friendly game for us. Absolute legend. I refer to it. It's only been in the last 6-8 months I now refer to it as the Mesut Ozil hole. I used to, for the last 20 years, I've referred to it as the Dennis Bergkamp hole. So 20 years, 2005. Yep, 20 years. Just make sure that's almost right. You don't name a position after a player unless that player is absolutely world class, and he is. And it's watching him in the World Cup playing for playing for the Netherlands was an absolute joy as well. That goal that he scored, I think it was in '94 maybe, before he signed for us. Sometimes I get that wrong. It might have been '98. Well, either way it was. Bottom right-hand corner, fantastic goal, fantastic player, and an absolute legend as well of a person. A lovely, lovely man, got time for everybody. And I remember him walking out onto the pitch with his 3 kids. I think he's 3 blonde kids and his blonde wife. And just everyone, the entire stadium, just cheering constantly for him because he is an all-time legend. And I think most fans of other teams, who, even if they were going to admit they were being a bit biased, they'd still say, yeah, he was one of the greats.
Yeah, no, absolutely, 100%. Just to finish on that segment then with Dennis, 86 to 93 with Ajax, 185 appearances, 103 goals, 93 to 95 with Internazionale in Italy, 52 appearances, 11 goals, and Arsenal, 1995 to 2006, 315 appearances, 87 goals, and also 79 appearances and 37 goals for his national side. And obviously currently the assistant manager at Ajax Amsterdam. And I'm sure we haven't heard the last of Dennis in current modern day football. So Dennis, we salute you and we welcome you to the Football Hipster Legend Hall of Fame. In you come, Dennis. Okay, so that pretty much wraps us up, other than some very brief listener questions. Now, I should just, again, remind everybody, apologies, we won't go on this long every week, but we had a lot to cover tonight, so we do thank you for bearing with us. We're just going to finish up with some very quick questions in the segment we call The Onion Bag. Okay, so our first question comes from Kat, who's a friend of the pod. She's in America, and she wants to ask a question for John. Did Juventus shoot themselves in the foot by selling their best players in the summer?
It's easy to say that now because of the performances they've put in. They were unfortunate in the fact that Marquisio got injured and that Khedira came in and also picked up an injury straight away. Obviously affected their midfield, but they didn't have so much say in. Tevez has been pushing for a move back to Boca for quite some time, and Pirlo was, whilst he probably could have played another season in Serie, he's at the wrong age really to keep going, and they had to replace him at some point. The players they've bought are good enough. They just, unfortunately, like I said, picked up injuries at the wrong time. And sometimes you just cannot mitigate for the amount of players you can lose in one season. So I'm sure you'll see Juventus hitting much better form later in the season. They just had a slow start.
Good stuff. No problem at all. Thank you very much. Quick question I'm going to give this one to Jake. And this one comes in from... Oops, I've lost it. Let me try again. It's a question from Gav, and he wants to know, he's at Gav_Gavo, Pro Evo or FIFA? Jake?
I'll try to field this one as quickly as I can. Right now, I'm going to say FIFA, but I'm putting an asterisk with it because... being a hardcore career manager mode player that I am, you notice in the last 3 or 4 years that they're just the lovely people over at EA Sports just don't seem to care about the those little intricacies mid-game and the silly things that go on during those little games. It seems that most of the focus is going to the online aspect of the game. Whereas, from the best of my knowledge, PES have really, really upped the challenge in getting the entire game right now. While they don't have really any league licenses, which really sucks for the game, but their in-game play, which is what I'm personally all about, is really, it is not very far behind FIFA at all. And I have to say that if the trend keeps going where that FIFA are more concerned about what happens with Ultimate Team and so on, I think that it won't be very long before PES overtakes them. But for me today, because I've been playing FIFA since 94 or around there, 96, I'm going to say FIFA, but the time will come where if PES had all the licenses, I'd have to say I might eventually think about jumping ship.
No worries. Good answer. Love that. Okay, we'll pick out two more and then we'll call it a day. So, question for Tom, and this comes from @Wengerolic, and he wants to know, is Aymeric Laporte the real deal or is he overrated?
For me, he's certainly overrated in terms of his buyout clause. However, that's the only way I can sway him being overrated. He is an exceptional talent. However, he's not really consistent in certain games for Athletic Bilbao, and they're a team that really do need him at the backs. Defensively, they can let in quite a few goals. In the game against Eibar, where they lost 2-0, was very susceptible in that game, and he does show that he can let a few players pass when he doesn't necessarily need to, or he should be making that challenge. But for me, he probably will end up at a bigger club in the future. I can't see it happening in the next couple of seasons, but he will certainly be pressing in that French team for a centre-back slot, seeing as the likes of Koscielny and Saka are getting older. But on the terms of his what's quoted to be around 40 to 50 million euro buyout clause, he's certainly not worth that much now, but he has the potential to be that worth in the future. I mean, Kris, being a French expert, I'm sure you have a few views on it.
Yeah, very briefly. My personal opinion, yes, definitely. He's a huge talent. I think he'll only get better. And I actually think that a big move is probably what is going to kickstart his career. I think if he gets the right move to the right club, and I've got to be honest, I don't know who that right club is yet, but I think if he does get a big move, personally, I think his style would suit Bundesliga. And I think if he gets the right move at the right time, he could well be sort of one of the very best defenders around. And people compare him to, or potentially think he could be as good as Varane. I think he's already at the same level as Varane was at the same age. So, yep, I 100% think he will be a success. We shall see. Okay, final question of today and of the first ever Football Hipsters podcast, I'm going to give to Danny. And Danny, it's a real doozy from our friend Luka Kolakusic, who's based in Croatia. And he wants to ask, which is the most important factor when determining which league is the best in the world? European success, general competitiveness, or entertainment value? Try and get through that in a quick time as you can.
I think it's a sliding scale of all three, where you have one maybe higher, but then the next one will be lower. But I think when you come to quality of teams, and you got the quality of play and the trophies, and I think more importantly the way they treat the fans, I think the Bundesliga outstrips every other league in every other way by a million miles. They may not be the best at everything, but some of the things they are best at. Bayern Munich almost unbeatable by anybody. The way they treat their fans is absolutely stunning. The competitiveness of the league is absolutely brilliant. The quality of the players is brilliant. The way the TV works is brilliant. And for me, I think that the Premier League, the La Liga, and all these other leagues could learn so much from the way that the Germans have done it, where they're not ripping their fans off, so much so that you'll get loads of English fans, probably thousands of English fans every weekend, that will go over to various German teams for the atmosphere. I mean, the Yellow Wave sums it all up, doesn't it? You go over there, £200-300 for a season ticket. It's cheaper to fly out there with get a plane ticket out there, stay over there, and then the night, and then get a ticket, and then come back again, and all that stuff. It's cheaper to do that than it is to go see a Premier League team where you're treated like, come in, sit down, watch the game, now get out.
Yeah.
So there you go. So I think everyone should take notice of the Bundesliga and how that's run by the fans for the fans.
Perfect answer. And just very quickly, Drew, just add your little bit there.
No. I think Danny hit it all. Actually, there's nothing more to say. Just apart from, I think that considering that the Germans are ahead of the game when it comes to youth development right now, that's another reason why I would peg it more than most leagues. There's so much, there's so many untapped young players there that so many people have not yet heard of. I don't think any other league can really boast that right now. And such a reliance on youth development, again, is huge for me personally as a fan of the game. And I know a lot of people are getting to that now these days too. So for me, that's what will do it for me.
I think one way to explain it, if people want to buy a book, Raphael Honigstein's Das Reboot, go read that and you'll see that what every nation in the world should take notice of. All the clubs got together with the German FA and said, look, we've got to sort this out after a disastrous World Cup or European Championships, and they all worked together and now look like Drew's just saying they got the best league in the world, they got the best crop of young players in the world, and go read the book. It's a brilliant read.
Absolutely, absolutely. And what better way to finish than that on our first pilot podcast for today? Do buy that book; it is fantastic. So there we go. That is us. We've covered an awful amount of stuff today. We really appreciate if you've made it this far. Well done to you. If you've given up halfway through, well, you've missed out. Come back. But no, thank you very much for anyone listening to this and downloading this. We are looking to return. We're putting this podcast out very much as an idea just to get a feel for whether people like us, whether people don't like us. We always welcome your feedback. We do have a Twitter account, so please do give us a follow and give us some feedback, and we will endeavour to incorporate things or take things away, whichever people prefer. You can follow us at the FH Podcast. The crew that you've heard on with me tonight, you will hear at least 2 of them on every podcast, sometimes 3. It will rarely be all of us because there's lots of us to get through, and we never end up boring you. We continue to bore you forever and ever and ever. So we'd like to keep it short and punchy. The shows we're hoping to do are going to be recorded on a Monday night. So obviously we've got the whole weekend to cover each week. So that really is it for us today. As I say, do send us your feedback. Let us know what you enjoyed, what you didn't enjoy, and we will be back. So all that remains to be said, on behalf of myself, Kris, I want to say thank you very much to John.
Cheers, Kris.
Thank you very much to Danny.
Cheers, me hearty.
And to Jake.
Thanks, darling.
And to Drew.
Yeah, Drew.
And Donald. And last but not least to Tom.
No worries.
Thanking you all, and also very, very massive thank you to Gaz, who is our editor, and Kelly, our researcher. So that was the very first ever Football Hipsters podcast. Keep your beard strong and your glasses trendy. We shall return. Thank you all, and good night. Hello, Kris again. We just want to say a massive thank you to you, the listener, for your support and indeed your time in downloading the pilot episode of the Football Hipsters podcast. If you want to keep in touch for future shows or get in touch with us personally, you can do so. Our website is www.thefootballhipsterspodcast.co.uk, or you can follow the Twitter account at the FH Podcast. Our podcast will be released on iTunes and available via our website. And you can follow us on Twitter at the following. You can follow myself, Kris, at AFCFreddy8, Danny at @the_GFP, John at JWelsh84, Tom at TCanton94, Drew at AFCBVB1410, and Jake at JakeArsenal1. You can also follow our producer, Gaz, at Gaz